This is, welcome everyone to the room. We are in the January 14th, 2014 City Council special meeting, study session. My name is Tom Vance. I am pleased to serve as your mayor. Madam City Clerk, will you have the roll call?
It's a study session or council?
Special meeting.
Special meeting.
Special. Thank you.
Mayor Tom Van,
Here?
Deputy Mayor Kathleen Huckabee,
Present.
Councilmember Don Jaron,
Here.
Councilmember Bob Keller,
Present.
Councilmember Tom Waddell,
Here.
Councilmember Ramiro Valderrama,
Present.
Here.
Okay, I do want to recognize a guest from one of our sister cities, North Bend. We have Alan Gotthelf in the audience. Thank you for coming, Alan. Alan also serves on the East Side Fire and Rescue Board, along with a couple of us. So thank you for coming by. Would you mind leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
We'll see how they do it. Go for your lunch, Alan.
Allegiance to the flag
The United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, well done. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Councilmember Huckabee?
I move that we change the agenda to allow the first executive session to go before the public comment.
Do you have a second for that?
I will second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
You opposed? Okay, we will go into,
I think Nancy has a comment.
Nancy,
I was just wondering why this change.
just to help our agenda along tonight.
Thank you.
Basically, that's it. We're going to go into executive session, potential litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.110. How long do you expect this to last, Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It would be probably about 15 minutes, and no action will be required by the council.
No action, okay. Thank you.
We have two executive sessions today.
Yes, we do.
We're in executive session. We'll be back shortly. Okay, next on our agenda is public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to address the council. 3 minutes limit per person, or 5 minutes if representing the official position of a recognized community organization. Okay. I have 3 people on the list. I'll ask afterwards if others would like to speak. Christina Pribernow? Please give your name and address as well for the record.
My name is Christina Pribernow, and I live at 233rd Place Northeast, Sammamish. And I'm here to speak out in reference to having the city take it a step further in ordinances and having ordinances against any type of temporary shelter for any length of time. There has always been homeless people through the walks of life and time, starting going back to the nomadic people, gypsies. In my day, they called them drifters, hobos. Now they call them a man of the road, a free spirit. But to have people live in encampments and allow them to live in encampments is opening up the floodgates for various groups. And who is going to be the one to discriminate one group from the next group? I much rather see permanent, affordable housing put into place, rent control, and raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna Lowe is on the list. Please give your name and address as well.
Good evening, City Council members. My name is Anna Lowe, and I'm a participant at Cheryl Wheel. Tent City 4, which is presently in Mary Queen of Peace Catholic Parish. This Friday, we will be moving. On the behalf of the camp, I would like to thank the council members. Our stay in Sammamish has been wonderful. We are especially grateful to Father Dugan and Mary Queen of Peace. But almost everyone in Sammamish and also almost everyone in the organization has a welcoming and supportive. We thank the City Council for the legislation that recognizes Mary Queen of Peace Parish and Tent City for the need to the 3-month stay. We thank the City Planning Department staff. They have been professional, flexible, and compassionate. The fire district and EMT workers have been good to work with us, has been the Sammamish Police Department. They will tell you almost every incident they had learned by us calling them and requesting for their help. The interest of Sammamish citizens in our camp has been overwhelming. The many meals prepared by Sammamish churches, youth groups, and other organizations have been incredible. Thanks to the donations of clothes, blankets, jackets, and Sammamish citizens, we have not gone cold this winter. We realize that it makes some people suspicious if we stayed in Sammamish after Mary Queen of Peace. We wish that some religious institution or organization in Issaquah or Woodinville or Bothell or Mercer Island would invite us, but no one yet has invited us. We are at risk at scattering. In 2013, there was 57 homeless people that died outside or by violence in King County. We don't want to be on that list here in 2014. That is why the residents of Share Wills, Tent City 4, voted to stay together and be safe, with or without an invitation. It's a matter of survival. To be candid, if a religious institution in Sammamish were to invite us to move to their site, we would accept the invitation. But we are very skeptical that this will happen now. As knowledgeable leaders in Sammamish, you must also know this. And unless we receive an invitation from Sammamish property owner, we will leave Sammamish this weekend. We have seen a draft on the moratorium of homeless encampments that you are considering tonight. This is not the first time Sherrill Tent City 4 has seen a moratorium on homeless encampments. Back in 2006, Sherrill Tent City 4 and North Shore United Church of Christ were refused a temporary use permit by the city of Woodinville. The city of Woodinville had put it in place exact kind of moratorium you are considering tonight. They claimed their moratorium trumped religious freedom and that we could not apply for a temporary use permit. Tent City 4 has no other invitations, so we moved to North Shore United Church of Christ in Woodinville without a permit. Here is what the Washington State Supreme Court concluded in that case. When they ruled against the city of Woodinville, this is the direct quote from their decision. The city violated the church's constitutional rights under Article 1, Section 11, when it refused to process the church permit application based on the total moratorium on temporary use permit in the area. Rather than seeking to impose reasonable conditions, the church project to protect and the safety of peace in the neighborhood, the city categorically prevented the church from exercising what the city concedes is religious practice. Please conclude or continue using the same level-headed judgment and compassion when you consider moratorium on encampments tonight as Sammamish City Council, as the Sammamish City Council has used throughout our stay in your beautiful community. Again, thank you for being good hosts these last 3 months.
We all thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Alan Galtoff?
Hi, my name's Alan Gotthelf. I live at 450 Southeast in North Bend. I'm here basically just to lend support to this council and answer any questions you have that might be for the East Side Fire and Rescue. I know there's some concern as to a motion that I made to form an advisory committee, and that intent of that motion was that that committee be formed. The step we took was to have the staff of Eastside Fire and Rescue make recommendations on how to form that staff. And the intent had always been to make sure that that was formed. This was something that was recommended by the city of Issaquah, and as a board member, I feel it's one of the most important things we need to be able to move forward in the next year to continue the work and effort over the last year of being able to bring this group together in a much more positive form in creating a fire service that we can all be proud of at the right value to our citizens. So I just wanted to make sure as somebody who met that motion, I supported. I also want to thank you for working with me over this last year to address some of the concerns I know that the city of Sammamish have. And we from North Bend and me look forward to continuing to support and be a partner with you guys in achieving these goals. And if you have any other questions during the time, please feel free to ask me.
Thank you. Ben?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want the council and the public to recognize that Alan has been a tremendous support for us throughout these negotiations, and he and his staff, his city in general, North Bend has been very supportive of City of Sammamish throughout this 2 years of negotiations. And we thank you for that, Alan.
My pleasure. I look forward to working with you guys next year and continuing our work that we've done together. Thank you for this time.
Thank you, Mr. Galtoff. And City Manager, I would agree with those sentiments that they were, North Bend were allies from more than a year ago. So, thank you.
Oh.
Nancy.
When I went on my angst about the fire district not being responsive to us, I said, with one exception, and that was North Bend, so thank you.
My pleasure. I look forward to doing more with you guys. We enjoy our relationship and want to continue that forward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else who would like to speak in public comment? Yes.
My name is C.J. Kaler. I live at 21911 Southeast 20th Street in Sammamish. I've been to talk to you before, and normally I'm very supportive of the actions that you're taking as you develop what your thought pattern is. Tonight I want to speak about your proposed ordinance, which I don't understand. What I don't understand about your ordinance is the wording where it says, declare an emergency and establish an immediate effective date. I've talked to a lot of people about all the things that Tent City has done while there and all the things they haven't done. Of everything I hear is a clean slate. I haven't heard of any major problems that have come up that would require an emergency nature. To me, if it's not an emergency nature, I understand why you'd want to write an ordinance about this issue, because most of the cities around here do have one. But lacking an emergency nature, I question the urgency of what you're going to try to do. And if it was an emergency, I would ask, you've had almost 90 days since you gave the first temporary use permit. What happened in that time? If there was an emergency, what happened? So I trust you will think about this carefully, and I trust you do the right thing as you normally do. Thanks.
Thank you, CJ. Anyone else would like to give public comment?
My name is Elizabeth Maupin. I coordinate the Issaquah-Sammamish Interfaith Coalition. I'm not a resident of Sammamish, but I work with faith communities in this area. I would like to say something about the need for temporary encampments. Across the county, there is some affordable housing. It's, I believe, 12% of the housing in Seattle. It's only 2% of the housing out here. We really need affordable housing. The waiting lists are unconscionably long for the subsidized housing that does exist. And in the meantime, until we create affordable housing, people need a safe place to be. Tents may not be ideal, but the encampments provide some safety for our residents. And it gives them a place from which to look for work, to continue work. And the one thing I would really recommend is look at the possibility of creating something that allows people to stay for more than 90 days in one community. It's really hard to keep a job when you have to move every 3 months. Thank you very much.
Thank you. One more time, anyone else like to give public comment? Seeing no one, public comment is closed. We'll move on to new business, and at that, I'll turn over to our city manager for the next item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I want to thank the council for their gracious efforts previously. Even though we didn't have our tent city ordinance, you pretty much allow us and directed us to use our temporary use permit to facilitate a permit request from the Mary Queen of Peace Church to allow the tent city to be located there. Furthermore, you have also been graciously extended 30 days when that permit was only 60 days, was going to expire in the middle of winter. And you didn't think it was appropriate, it was right, and it was a Christmas time, you wanted to extend that 30 days. The difficulty and challenge, however, as we go forward, we really haven't engaged our community in development of our rules and regulations. Most of these ordinances, when we looked at them, they require 60 to 75 days notices. We don't have that notice at this juncture with our temporary use, and temporary use permit process that we have is never tailored to be handling this kind of ordinances. I just wanted to respond to the comments made for affordable housing. I want you to know that my council truly believes in that, and they joined to Regional Coalition of Affordable Housing. That's the consortium of number of East King County cities. Council also donated that the old public workshop site at the 228th Avenue and the Southeast 24th Street to Habitat for Humanity. There, Southeast 20th, I'm sorry. And that project is, we're hoping that will become a reality within about 2 years. In addition to that, and every rules and regulations that the council adopted, that we tried to pay close attention to affordable housing. So before any further comments on this, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to ask my police chief to come up there to give us a little brief report on the police activities associated with the tent city. Then I'm going to ask the community development director to give us a report on the proposed ordinance. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our police chief, Nate Alledge. Nate?
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. When we learned that Tent City was potentially coming to Sammamish, we did our due diligence and contacted several police agencies that had the jurisdictions where Tent City had previously been. And we learned, especially in the last few years, there was not a lot of police activity at Tent City. And some agencies telling us they responded to maybe one call. So I'm here now to report out on our experience up until this point through today on what we've experienced here at Tent City. And I'm just this is just the facts. I'm just reading facts from our statistics. And I want you to know that we've conducted 119 checks of Tent City, patrol checks. And these are proactive checks that we agreed to do. Tent City is used to this. They're used to seeing the police walk through a couple times a day. Our officers have done the same thing. And we've done that 119 times through its existence. We've also responded to 30 calls at Tent City, 30 calls for service. And these range from checking the welfare of someone inside that may have a medical issue or a mental health issue. We have had some controlled substance violations. We have had some suspicious circumstances call, which is kind of something we use to summarize. We're not quite sure what to call it. Maybe a suspicious person acting suspiciously, and we just summarize it as a suspicious circumstance call. We responded to 5 disturbance calls at Tent City, a couple of trespass calls. couple of thefts from property, a missing person call, and so forth. So we have made some warrant arrests as well. We did also have a narcotics investigation that you need to know about, and it resulted in the arrest of 2 Tent City residents, one who had just been ejected from Tent City and the other who was just walking outside of Tent City when we made the arrest. We had information that we needed to follow up on for the safety of our community and for the safety of those in Tent City, that there may be some drug dealing going on within Tent City. And so it's our duty to investigate this allegation, and we did over about a 3-week period, and we did end up arresting one person as he was, like I said, as he was exiting Tent City. As a male, and when we arrested him, he did have a methamphetamine pipe and some residue in his pocket. He was arrested on a warrant as well, I believe. That male had told us, and we believed he was the center of whatever dealing might be going on, if there was any, inside Tent City. And according to him, he said that he had dealt several times that day in Tent City and that he had exhausted his supply. And we went to his tent. We had heard there may be some methamphetamines in his tent. We went there, and there was nothing there in the tent. The other male we arrested had just been ejected. Tent City kicked him out. He came over here to pick up some property we happened to have and had a warrant for his arrest, and we ended up arresting him and finding a small amount of methamphetamines in his pocket. So both of those subjects are going to be charged with felony violation of the Controlled Substance Act. About half the calls we received, and it's important for you to know, for some reason have come after the 30-day extension. So we received 30 calls up for the first 60 days, 15 calls, and then 15 calls in the last 30 days. And we're not so sure why that is, but our call volume has increased in the last 30 days after the extension was filed. About half of the calls we have were reported by Tent City staff. So about 50%, this Tent City doing exactly what they said they would do, calling us, reporting if they have someone with a warrant or someone that's a registered sex offender, which in this case, we don't believe we had any registered sex offenders attempt to check in to Tent City. Some of the calls we have been responded to that I've mentioned have been determined to be unfounded. So it's important to note that not every time we get a call does it mean an actual crime has occurred. We get there and investigate and determine now there's actually something here did not happen. And we've made a total of 8 arrests during the 90-day period, many of those for warrants, some of those generated from calls from Tent City staff. We did have 2 arrests today. We received some inquiries from several different media sources about an arrest today. We did have a couple of people causing a disturbance, threatening Tent City staff. We responded out there and arrested both of those subjects for threats or harassment, and both were booked into the jail. The activity we have here is not near the activity that we saw Tent City first started existing probably in 2004 or so. Those agencies dealt with a lot, and some agencies actually had to put full-time officers there. We haven't had to deal with that. And to be honest, and I'm going based on fact, we have seen an uptick, though, in what the types of calls for service compared to the last few jurisdictions, and we're not sure exactly why that is. With the exception of the area checks, our response to Tent City has been primarily reactive. So we're not out there going into Tent City trying to find activity. This is us responding in there on calls, trying to take care of whatever issue is that's going on. I want to also, and I'll conclude my comments, to say we've also had a lot of positive interactions. I don't want to put a whole negative twist on this, and I think it's important to note that our officers have had some positive interactions with people in Tent City as well. And it's been some negative, as I've mentioned, and it's been some positive. So it's important to note that.
Thanks, Nate. I'm going to ask our Community Development Director to give a report at this point, unless there's any question for Nate. Seeing none, I'll have Cameron Gurel, Community Development Director, to give us a report on the interim ordinance. Cameron?
Thank you, Ben. Just got a handful of slides that I'll go through. Turn that on. Just to explain the ordinance that was developed for your consideration tonight relating to homeless encampments, it's a 6-month moratorium that would preclude any filing or processing or approval of permits for this use of temporary homeless encampments. In that ordinance, the City Council is repeating your direction actually from last December to produce permanent regulations as soon as possible. We've been working with the City Manager to try to prioritize that at the Planning Commission. And I'll also say that this is an emergency ordinance, so it is effective immediately. And there is a public hearing that has been set in the ordinance for March 4th, as we're required to do under state law. Just to respond briefly to the earlier public comment, the reason that it's an emergency ordinance is not because Tent City poses an emergency for the city. It's an emergency ordinance, I'd say, for a primary reason, which is to create a level playing field for all potential applicants, all potential stakeholders, and give the city a period of time in which to develop regulations that respond to the facts and take into account all the input from the different stakeholders. It is a technique that's authorized under state law. Sammamish has used it from time to time, not with homeless encampments in mind, but things like the town center or other things where it does, its advantages that it's effective immediately, and it provides that window of time without pending permit applications to make a good policy decision. So that was the reason that we're using this emergency provision in state law, not because Tent City presents an emergency, but it creates that opportunity under state law. It looks like I have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Well, I do have a question. You were alluding to giving a fair playing field to the other applicants. Do we have any other applicant on the horizon or inquiries?
We have no pending applications, and I think it's common knowledge that Good Samaritan Episcopal Church had expressed an interest in hosting Tent City as of late last week. We heard, I think it was either late Sunday night or Monday morning from them that they had reconsidered and withdrawn that invitation. So that is no longer on the horizon, as you said.
But there are no other applicants then?
There are no other applicants.
Councilmember Wooden?
If we were to, what's the shortest period of time, if you put this on the fast track, that you could get an ordinance in place, a substantive ordinance?
Well, I think we want to do this properly. Perhaps once I conclude the next couple of slides, I'll try to work that answer into that part of the presentation, if that's okay.
I guess my question is gearing toward, could we do it and have a moratorium for 4 months rather than 6?
I
if
think
you
it's
keep
your
that in mind
choice.
when you...
Yeah, and let me respond to that as I present the next couple of slides. It is the council's choice as to the length.
Okay.
Okay. So let me just remind the council, there's some context under state law, and just so we all know, religious organizations do enjoy protection under state law to host these kinds of uses. Cities also enjoy authority to regulate time, place, and manner. And so really that's what we're dealing with here, is not whether the use can occur, but the time, place, and manner as to how that use occurs. So things that go into time, place, and manner requirements are things like how often, the frequency, the location, any locational criteria, the duration. Earlier commenter offered comment on that. It would, our regulations would specify the specific permit process type, would identify what kind of public notice and comment opportunities or appeal opportunities, and then it would also likely include standard requirements that would probably be common across any proposed site, and then authority for site-specific conditions to respond to local issues that may come up. Permanent regulations, the good news is that there's a lot to look at in terms of examples from other jurisdictions. On the left, you can see peer cities that have adopted or considered regulations, and I've got a stack of those that we've already started looking through here. And then on the right is a column of the issues that are typically addressed. This is not exhaustive. There are actually more issues than this, but I just picked a few that might be of interest that come up. They range from public safety issues to typical land use issues like setbacks and screening and fire protection, et cetera. So we'll be likely dealing with all of these as a part of the regulations. And I guess I would, in answering Councilmember Witten's question, here's the list of the research and the issues that we have to go through. Ben always, our city manager, wants us to do it fast, but he wants us to do it right rather than twice. So I would sooner take the time necessary to go through a thorough process and make sure the Planning Commission has time, that the public and all the stakeholders who have an interest in this are able to talk to the commission, to the staff, that we do a little retrospective on our experience here with Tent City 4, so that we understand what issues the property owner had, positive and negative, the issues that community had, et cetera. Allow staff to compile all of that. So I don't want to necessarily overpromise that we can deliver this on a particular timetable. And I do think so I guess if I was making this decision, I'd stick with the 6 months, and I'll work with Ben to see how quickly we can actually deliver it within that window, rather than coming up with a shorter time.
Yeah, there's some notice requirements with the public hearings. We have to work through the planning commission. We need to get all the stakeholders' input, and then we have to come to the council. Council also has own public hearings and processes. Also need to coordinate with mayor and deputy mayor. The previous council direction, the prioritizing the tree ordinance as one of the things that the planning commission is a priority. So we're going to put this thing in front of everything. Can we do some parallel tracks? So those are the things that I need to work through it. My suggestion is that to keep it to 6 months right now, and if we can do it sooner, we're going to do everything we can to accelerate that, obviously.
I'm sorry, you said your suggestion is for how many months?
6 months, the way that the ordinance is proposed.
Councilmember, or Deputy Mayor Huckabee.
Tent City's been a wonderful experience for the community. We have just heard multiple churches have been preparing meals. We've enjoyed going down and working with some of the people at Tent City. Our children have gone down. It's just been great. The concern I'm sure the community has is, where is Tent City going to go? And are we forcing them out? It's my understanding that they may have a place to go, and there's actually that nobody has applied to ask them to stay here, but I understand on their website it indicates that they may be leaving.
Cameron, you want to just...
Is that correct?
I don't think we know where they're going. What they have stated, and they've been very explicit about this verbally and on their website, is that they will move on Friday the 17th, and the move will be completed by Saturday the 18th.
Okay.
So that complies with our permit conditions. We don't know where they're going to go. Certainly, all of us hope for a safe legal location as their next landing spot. But they have been very explicit about committing that they would move on time.
Okay.
Councilmember Odell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cameron, two things. One real quick one. Under your topics and issues list here, second item down, SO check.
Sex offender. Sex offender.
Thank you. If we were to, on the second issue, if we were to accomplish all this in less than 6 months, we could make the effective date whatever we chose to do, which could be within the 6-month window. That would effectively rescind the emergency.
That's correct. The moratorium does not have to last the full 6 months if the council finishes early.
Thank you.
Continue.
With that, Mr. Mayor, we're asking for council's motion to approval of, I'm sorry?
Don't we have to have a hearing? Ordinance?
Emergency ordinance, the hearing date is set in March 4th. With that, do we need the council motion to approve this ordinance?
Do I have a motion to approve the ordinance?
So move.
Second? Have a second?
Discussion?
Any further discussion? Councilmember Valderrama.
Yeah, well, I think I appreciate the staff presenting their presentations, and particularly Chief Eldridge making note of the community and the positives that have come with Tent City. I think that's important to go back and reiterate the generosity of our community that's been shown to date, and the experience, the positive nature and experience. I can't tell you the dozens of people, including my own family, that have enjoyed the interactions with Tent City on a personal basis, whether it's meeting them, taking food out there, working with them, bringing the shelter, our civic organizations as well. I think, obviously, the religious issue is covered by the Constitution and is not in play here. I, more than anyone else, as chairman of the Public Safety Committee, am concerned about the public safety. But I am concerned also here about a potential overstep of our authority of putting an emergency act into place without an applicant that's on the horizon or inquiry. I'm also concerned that we have had 90 days to have been working on this, including the last extension for 30 days. And that troubles me to see if this is an overreach of the use of an emergency action to block something, particularly when we were just told that it might not be enough and we have to extend again. So I have a serious concern, not on the issues of public safety or religious issues, and much less on the generosity and the positive experience overall that's had here. But I am concerned why this wasn't done in the last 90 days or started. And given that there are no inquiries or applicants, and 10 City has said they're leaving, that why this is then needed as an emergency.
Councilmember Witt?
I empathize with Tent City 4. I think it has been a wonderful experience. We will look forward to welcoming you back, and I hope many times around. I do think we need to weigh community interests, immediate neighbors especially, and their interests. And I think people can now, under the temporary use permit, which is not tailored to a tent city encampment, aren't even entitled to a notice process, or advance notice. And I think it makes it very difficult in the balancing we have to do. When we extended the moratorium very positively last December, especially, we would have been the Grinches right before Christmas, boy. Great time to extend. We were told that you would not be applying for an extension or any other place immediately in Sammamish, as I understood it. Maybe I understood it wrong, but that's what I understood. That was one reason why, to counter Councilmember Valderrama's points, we didn't feel any urgency because we didn't think there would be a new application and that we would have some time. We recognize that even if we wanted to, we couldn't ban tent cities because of the law, and I think that's great. I think we need to make room for all affordable housing choices, including tent cities, and I know it's a lifeline for a lot of people. I'm mixed in terms of a moratorium, but you don't have a current application on hand. The 90 days, that makes no sense to me whatsoever, because we felt no urgency to start working on a moratorium at that point in time. Now I think we've recognized that having tent city here is going to be a recurring phenomena that we welcome, but we want to do it in a way that's equitable to both the neighbors and to the encampments. And to do that, we need to go through a process, and that's what government is all about. We've enjoyed having you. It's been a wonderful thing for kids, for neighbors, for the churches. It gives people a way of helping, and people really want to be out there helping and doing things. So, as I said, when the church pastor came up the first time, I said, welcome. Really, we look forward to having you again. So I'm not even sure right now, this very second, which way I'm going to vote. I have to know it's going to come up very shortly, but I wanted to say thank you for coming. You've contributed to the community. You've given a lot of people the help we need. We do need to get our ducks in order and make it fair to the neighbors, and go through the process so everybody gets notice, and we can go through and see what's best for the community. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Okay, any further comments? Councilmember Odell?
Thank you. I concur with a good deal of what Councilmember Witten just said. In fact, I concur with all of it. We did have a rather full plate in the last several months of the past year. In fact, we added back a session that we'd previously canceled to deal with the issues we had in front of us at the time. When we had the initial application, it's my recollection that there was an awful lot of emotion involved on the part of the community, both pro and con on it. And the fact that we've had Tent City here for the last several weeks has been, I think, a learning experience for everybody. And as been pointed out, a positive experience in many respects. This said, I think we do need to have the opportunity to give our residents the opportunity to weigh in, plus also the advocates for the homeless. I'm often reminded of a phrase my dad often used, and that is, therefore, but for the grace of God, go I. We all could be in their position at some point in our lives, and maybe some of us have been. So from that standpoint, I think we need to be open-minded about this. We need to look at the implications of where they would be relocated. Some of the locations I've understood might have been under consideration were less than ideal in terms of access to services such as shopping, public transportation, et cetera. And we need to give some thought to how we deal with all this. Sammamish is unusual in the fact that we are somewhat limited in public transportation, and we may, if things don't go right at the state and county level, we'll end up even more limited in the future than we are today. But for that reason, I think I would be in favor of trying to get this thing done as quickly as possible. As I said earlier, if we get this passed, we get everything wrapped up before the 6-month moratorium goes, it's up to this council has a prerogative to truncate the 6-month time and go from there.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor, I'm having trouble getting to that.
I know.
Deputy Mayor Huckabee.
Again, I want to say thank you for coming. It has just been a wonderful experience for the community. I do think taking this 6-month moratorium and a bit of a breather to look at the regulations, and I'm very pleased that we have a 6-month limitation on that, otherwise it could slip even further. It will give us an opportunity. One of the concerns that I've had is how we organize transportation. And I think, in fairness to you, taking that time, maybe that 60 days or 75-day notice period, is a time for the community to organize, because I know many of you go to work, many of you have come to my church, and we want to make sure that you have the appropriate transportation facilities so that you're able to do that. Again, I'm very pleased that we've limited it to 6 months, and I look forward to getting through that process and then having an opportunity to have you back.
More comment? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor of the ordinance as written, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
By your
I'm going to vote nay.
By your vote of 5-2, it passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I guess we're going to continue with the special meeting, or do you want to adjourn and go to study session? I guess
Are
we
we doing
didn't
the
make that clear.
applicant interviews? Is that the study session?
That was the study session,
Oh,
but
okay.
that's not on our agenda at this point, so I suppose we can just continue, or? Okay. Mr. City Manager, who will begin that?
The applicant interviews, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to turn it over to our esteemed city clerk, Melanie. Melanie.
Yes, tonight we will be having applicants for the Parks and Rec Commission candidates and the Planning Commission candidates. We have 5 Planning Commission candidates who will be interviewing tonight. Emmanuel Soto couldn't be here. And then we'll have 3 Parks Commission candidates. And if I could ask all the candidates to move out into the lobby area, and we'll bring you in one at a time for your interviews.
Who knows? Got down to the others.
Are we missing something?
Yeah. Just takes a while.
out?
Planning, parks, there's the, okay, where's our? Is that in the back?
You say planning commission first? You say planning commission first?
I didn't say either one, but I think we'll go ahead and do Parks Commission first.
Oh, parks, okay.
Because A comes before L.
Yeah, that's right, it's alphabetical, I think.
Then wouldn't Doug Eglinton be first?
But he's last in line.
Well, there's alphabetical or there's in line.
They sent me out first. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Oh,
I guess we're doing Parks first then.
Commission.
Okay. Could you go ahead
I'm
and...
glad somebody made a decision of what the order was.
My kids are home alone, so I said, you know, it's probably good that I go before my house gets burned down, so. Name is Steve Wright. I live at 23521 Northeast 10th Place, Parks
Could you give us a
Commission.
minute on yourself? Now, you're an existing member of the
Yeah.
Parks
You want
Commission.
about me, who I am?
And why you're reapplying or applying, in this case? or
Sure,
reapplying?
sure. So, you know, my parents have lived, I really grew up here. I was 16 in 1986. My parents moved up to the Plateau, and for the most part, I've lived most of my life, other than a little time in college down in Southern Cal. My real-time job is I'm the executive director of the Northwest Parkinson's Foundation, and it's a full-time job. You'll notice on my attendance record hasn't been spectacular. That's because my job and my family are my number one, number two, not in that order, reverse order, priorities, but my volunteer work comes a close third. So as long as we take those other things first and second, then I'll give as much time as I can to this. I enjoy what I've been able to do. Been doing it now for quite a while with a small little break in time, and I've learned a lot. We have some amazing commissioners. The one thing I think I bring to the commission that perhaps is otherwise missing is young kids. So I have 3 young kids, the ones that are burning the house down right now, 11, 9, and 7, who use the parks, who are in the sports leagues, who are in the public schools. So I think I bring that. We had another parks commissioner, but he opted not to reapply. So I would be the only one with the young kids if I was chosen to serve again. So hopefully
Okay,
that
thank you.
sums it up.
Do we have some questions from council for Mr. Wright? Councilmember Odell?
Thank you. Steve, thanks for reapplying. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
In the time you've been on the Parks Commission, what's really turned you on about it?
You know, it really is about the kids, for me. It's driving down the street or coming out here, seeing the spray park, or taking the kids out to Beaver Lake. Just all those little things that make this city so great for the kids. And that's really my priority, is the children. So, I learn a lot from the other commissioners, from Jesse, from you all, from Ben. It's a learning experience. Every meeting I have, I go back, and it drives my wife nuts because I can't sleep when I get home, because I'm just fired up. I'm like, there's so many cool things to learn.
We identify with that.
Okay, you guys experience the same thing? Yeah. That's fun. It drives her nuts, but it's fun.
Councilmember Jared?
Steve, I was just wondering what project you would like to work on in the future, and not counting zip lines.
I wasn't the zipline guy. That was Hank.
I know.
I'm the mountain biker. Well, obviously, I have a real fondness for the community center. And I will continue to advocate for that. You know what I really want to, and I think that's going to do a great job of bringing North Sammamish and South Sammamish together. I think some of you have heard me talk about that before. I'm really looking forward to that aspect. The other thing I would really love to see is more interaction with the sports leagues between the two sides. I mean, I realize there's 2 school districts and why it has evolved this way, but it's a disservice to our kids not to meet other people.
Any other questions? Councilmember Keller?
Yeah, I'm just curious, on your experience with the Parks Commission, what was the most difficult challenge that you had in your last term?
Bob, could you pull your...
I'm sorry.
I'm looking at mine.
Steve, I'm curious, spending the last 4 years on the Parks Commission, I'm sure there were a number of things that you grappled with. And so my question is, what was the most interesting to you and the biggest challenge that you resolved?
The most interesting to me is something that you guys work with every day, and that's the public meetings. You know, it's a challenge because we have our ideas, or I have my ideas of the way things should be. You know, I'm the executive director of an organization, so typically when I push for things, they happen. A little bit different in city government, and that's it's a learning process, but you know, it's fascinating and it's fun to see that. It really is. It can drive me crazy at times, but you know what? The more input you get, you usually end up with a better result. So that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you guys. Thanks for your service and your leadership. I'm going to leave and go see if my house is burned down. So thank you.
Thank you. Hello,
Good evening.
you're Ann Precup, I believe.
Yes, I am. I'm Ann
Raise your hands
Precup.
before the meeting. Can you give us just a minute on yourself and your interest in the Parks Commission?
Okay, certainly, I'd love to. I have lived here in Sammamish for over 25 years, and Sammamish has come to be a place that I really care a lot about. I'm especially concerned about our places where we can relax and learn and play and contribute. So I have been involved in a number of parks and recreation activities over the years, and I just want to be involved in a new way. I'd like to help nurture the programs and the places that kind of create balance in the lives of the individuals who live here. My values kind of align with the core values of the community that's indicated in the PRO plan: stewardship, sustainability, integrity, teamwork, that kind of thing. But what brought me to being so interested in volunteering is just a passion for just creating a wonderful life for the people here in Sammamish and being part of it. I've been involved in everything from the ball fields, being at the ball fields with my kids as they were growing up, to direct grassroots efforts here with preservation and conservation things that are going on, as well as the park program development. My experience has included everything from manning an Earth Day event to being a volunteer ambassador at the grand opening of the Sammamish Landing Park, to being the co-chair of the Sammamish Community Garden, the creation of our first community garden in the town. And presently, I'm the volunteer coordinator, planning education, kind of classes and workshops for the gardeners as well as community members in our town, just to help equip them to be successful in gardening. I'm also working on a seed lending library and hoping to collaborate with an Eagle Scout to put together something at the community garden that will just make the experience there more rich for the community. I also co-manage the Community Garden Facebook page. And in addition, I'm trained as a salmon watcher by the King County Conservation District, where I ID and track salmon in our local streams. I also completed training as a master gardener through Washington State University and am a volunteer outreach educator. And I also do fruit trials at the Bellevue Urban Demonstration Garden. But I have a proven track record working with the Park Commission and this great council and the city staff. And I attend a lot of the parks meetings. I like to stay abreast with what is happening in our community, both on the council level and in the commission level. And this year I was honored by being nominated for a SAMMY for environmental stewardship. So that was real exciting for me too.
Okay. Any questions in particular? Councilmember Valderrama.
I'm going to steal Jaren's question from the last issue, and I'd be interested to know, what are your new projects that you're considering or interested in particularly dedicating yourself to this year?
That's a very good question. I'm particularly excited about whoever was the originator of that question. It's very good. I am especially interested in connectivity in our parks and recreation program spaces and services. I love the idea of the Emerald Necklace. I also love the idea of making the parks, places, and services very convenient for every member in our community, so that, you know, as we start living closer and closer together, we start becoming more isolated. It's a kind of an interesting irony. And I just think it's so important for us to be really focusing on bringing everyone together, and that includes some of the things that I just talked about, as well as just making sure that the things at the community center are, you know, really address a lot of diverse interests.
Councilmember Whitten.
We had a recent, very recent input from Tent City on an ordinance. One of the suggestions in one of the letters is that the city open up its parks. For example, the specific one suggested was Beaver Lake Park, 2 homeless encampments. How, as a Parks Commissioner, would you deal with that?
That's a tough one. I feel strongly that we need to embrace the homeless and provide opportunities for them in our area. I think that it really goes back to kind of our vision and pro-plan, and making sure that that all is in alignment with that. I do feel that as far as opening a park, I think the neighbors would be, it would be critical to be in touch with them and find out if that would be suitable for them. I was part of the public process in changing the master plan for the Lower Commons, and bringing the neighbors involved, I think, was critical. So I think that would be an important step.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Tom Odell?
Thank you.
Odell, I should say.
Well, I answered either one. And thank you for applying, and thank you for all the work you've done in the community gardens. It's just terrific. And I think the community is much better off with the community garden than we were, say, a couple of years ago. Great success. On a different thing, though, perhaps somewhat different plane here. 1/3 of the population of Sammamish is 18 or less. And one of the issues that has made me wonder in the past is youth summer programs, youth activities. Can you perhaps share for 30 seconds or so your thinking about what we might do with that regard, with that issue?
Mm-hmm. I just love it that we are such a kind of diverse town and have a real strong youth population here. And I love it that we have a teen center that can address a lot of the needs of the kids. I love it that we have a skateboard park to also give them a place to play. I would love to see programs that start getting kids back to kind of fundamentals, teaching, giving them gardening, sort of getting into the dirt, kind of getting back to nature. And that might be where the community center comes into play, where we could offer just kids to start knowing where their food comes from, getting involved in growing organic produce, also teaching them about outreach, finding ways to give to others who are less fortunate, maybe having an outreach garden. And I can see a school maybe participating with our community in some kind of a teaching garden. So that's just one aspect of how I see kind of enriching the lives of the youth. I really feel it's important to have both inside and outside options for kids. So I'm just a real proponent of a gathering place like the community center, and look forward to having opportunities for kids to play inside and learn inside as well as outside.
Councilmember Gerand?
Thank you. And a few of your comments really resonated with me. And connectivity, I know we're working on the connectivity down to Big Rock from Lower Commons and also from Sahali Way down to Evans Creek Preserve. And of course, the Emerald Necklace is something I'm really interested in. And for the audience, if you want to learn more about the Emerald Necklace, go to Sammamish Friends website. You can just bing it and you'll find it. So thank you very
Yes.
much.
Thank you.
Councilmember Huckabee?
Yes, I appreciated
Deputy Mayor Huckabee?
Councilmember Odell commenting on that the population is under 18. But when we've traveled to China and we traveled to Europe, we see adults in the parks exercising Tai Chi, other things, elderly citizens. We know we have an obesity epidemic. It's difficult for older people sometimes to, I shouldn't say that, it's not a derogatory statement at all, but to also encourage our senior population to enjoy our parks and to have activities in our parks. And I'm wondering what sort of thoughts you have around that in addition to the community center offerings.
Yeah, that's a good question, because I'm headed that direction. I think we all are. I think we all know that being active is critical as we age, and that we need to have plenty of options for all of us as we get up in years. I think that having Tai Chi out up on the Lower Commons is like an awesome idea. And we have a new shed up at the community garden where if it gets kind of crummy, we can go inside. So just, I think, making sure that there's enough structures out there where we can gather if the weather is lovely or not. But I think with seniors, we know from surveys that they thrive if they are with people. That when we are alone, we don't thrive. And so it's an important thing for us to consider as we're planning things for the future, to keep that in mind. I think the library, being able to have a way to transport seniors to events is important, especially as we grow and housing issues for seniors are very diverse and their needs are very diverse. So making sure that they're able to get to wherever the activities are, but utilizing just what we have in a real efficient and effective way is important, as well as developing things for the future with that demographic in mind. So as you pointed out, the community center, but also I know there's a lot of great opportunities at the library. I'm going to be holding a class here in the city chambers on tomatoes in April, and so I can see all different generations being part of that kind of a workshop.
Okay, any other questions? Councilmember Keller?
I see, obviously, from your participation in the Parks Commission, you may have seen that from time to time they may not agree on everything themselves as much as it is a amiable group. I've sat in one of their meetings where they had long discussions, and here it says that you led the team for research with the community garden, and I just wonder if you could comment on your experience there where there was some dissension among that group and how you handled that.
You know, working with a team is a beautiful thing, but it does have times when we don't agree. And I think the most important thing that I kept in mind was that it's good that everyone has their own opinions. If we didn't have our own opinions, it would be a really boring place. And sometimes out of those great opinions and I hate to use the word divisiveness, but just some roadblocks in the way of coming to an understanding, some really great ideas are born. And it allows us an opportunity to brainstorm. So I think when we were conducting research for the garden, we needed to keep the community as our first priority in what would be best for the community and try to set aside kind of our personal feelings. This is very specific and it might be a little too specific, but we had some differences in opinions of how to keep deer out. And to a gardener, that's very important, but, aesthetics come into mind, and effectiveness comes into a mind. And so we had to, it was wonderful being part of that team to be able to sit at the table and say, okay, let's think about what another gardener might want from this. And that really helped to kind of separate us from the personal part of the issue to looking at it as, someone else, another gardener that might want to know how they're going to keep the deer from eating their roses or their produce.
Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate your applying.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
City Manager?
Mr. Mayor, may I ask for 5 minutes of recess of the council for biological needs? And then also, I need to also...
Let's
confirm
do a
with you.
5-minute break, and we'll be back in at least 10 minutes. Thank you. Could you go ahead and just, I mean, we all know you, but give us your name for the record, and give us about a minute and as we get into questions, could you try to answer concisely? I guess that's the nicest way I can put it. So give us a minute on why you are applying and what your interest is in the Parks Commission.
Again, Doug Eglinton, for the record. I live at 420 238th Avenue Northeast, 98074. There's two reasons that I've applied for this position, and one of them was my motivation. I walk my dog, Rozzy, at Illahee Trail Park every day that's not just totally pouring down rain. And I do pick up after her, and I do have her on a leash, so just for the record. And over the years, as a member of the Kiwanis Club, I've been involved in a number of service projects in improve our parks, and actually, in the case of the landing park, actually helping to develop it, clear raspberry bushes or blackberry bushes and that sort of thing. In fact, I can say that I've actually shed blood on behalf of the city in developing its parks from the blackberry bushes. Are pretty nasty when you get tangled up in them. So, one, I'm motivated. Two, I think I have the background to really support the management and the development of our parks. And that is, as I think you all know, I've served almost 25 years on the Lake Washington School Board. In that capacity, been involved with probably over $1 billion, overseeing over $1 billion worth of capital projects. So I think I know a lot about capital projects, so that kind of information I think will come in handy in trying to help advise the direction of our parks and recreation programs. And obviously, in the area of policy, I've had extensive experience. And also, for the record, I have a master's in public administration as kind of the underpinning of all that. I think one thing that, well, I guess there's a couple of other things, other factors. Selfish reason, I think that a good quality parks and recreation program really enhances the property value for all of us. It really improves the quality of life in the city, and has really contributed to some of the national recognition the city has received because of that. And then the other thing that I think sometimes is overlooked about a viable parks and recreation program is it really contributes to the actual health of the community. As a longtime King County policy person with about 30 years in that area, I'm very familiar with the work that public health people have done in defining what a healthy community is. And a viable parks and recreation program really contributes to the overall health of the community.
Okay.
From everything from walking to other forms of recreation.
Do we have some questions? Councilmember Witten.
Thank you for applying. It's nice to have someone with your rich background interested in our parks. Why did you choose parks versus planning or arts?
Well, I think it's an area that I don't have as much. I think it gives me an opportunity, I think, to grow in terms of my knowledge about how cities work. I'm more familiar with some of the other areas, but I think the park and recreation thing really strikes me as something fun on the one hand, but also an opportunity to learn more about how parks and recreation programs work and that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Huckabee.
Yes, I know you have a passion for children, and I was struck by a comment by another candidate who referenced the fact that most of our organized recreation is structured around the school districts as opposed to across the community. I'd like your comment on that, as well as some thoughts as to how you might promote, because as you remember, when we talked about incorporating, one of our concerns was that we have activities that will bring the community together. So how do we go about bringing our young community together?
Well, I think, as you mentioned, we do have, kind of the natural relationship with the school districts. And as, one thing I'm proud about in terms of my work with Lake Washington School District is that we've really developed a partnership with the city in terms of the use of our field, particularly at Eastlake High School. And I think that's an area that we can continue to enhance. And I think we can probably do some more work with Issaquah as well. I mean, we do have the relationship with the Skyline field, but I think we can improve that partnership. In terms of, I think that we are, with the Boys and Girls Club facility in the old library, and the work that we're doing particularly with young teens, I think that's is bearing fruit. But I think an area that needs attention is the older teenagers, and I think that's a real challenge, is how we engage those folks, and maybe work. As you know, the Youth Commission is involved with the Parks and Recreation Program. I think provides the staffing for it. And there may be some ways to engage the commission in trying to figure out some, more effective ways to engage the older teens and that sort of thing. I'm more concerned, I think, that our Parks and Recreation programs are really accessible to the whole range of ages in the city. I think as I become more of a senior citizen, I'm concerned about making sure that our recreation programs and our parks are both on the physical side and on the program side accessible to the full range of ages in this community, and that we really try to make sure that seniors are engaged, and people with various abilities are not left behind as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Odell, did you have something?
Thank you. Doug, real quickly, what 2 or 3 priorities would you have as a Parks Commissioner? I think you mentioned seniors, that's one, but what would be the others?
Well, I think the 3, I think that active stewardship, making sure that our programs continue to be within budget, and recognize that we're always under limited resources. That's 1. 2, that, as I said earlier, programs are accessible to the full range of people in this community. And 3, that we exhaust as many opportunities for partnerships as we can find. In other words, that we really pursue partnerships with our school districts and with other appropriate groups to make sure that we get full value for the resources that we do have, and that we can stretch those resources to serve as many people as possible.
Thank you. Councilmember Keller?
I'm wondering if I've been going into the past here with my questions, and so in staying with that, maybe you could describe a partnership that you've seen in your past on the board with the city that not necessarily applies here, but one that you felt was very effective.
Well, again, I think what the school district has done in terms of, those are facilities that are paid for by the public, and, should be, we should get as much use out of those as possible. They shouldn't be just limited during the school day. So as we all know, with the work we've done with particularly Eastlake High School, those facilities have been improved, the maintenance level has been increased, and the programming has been, I think they're used almost 18 hours a day. I think another effective partnership I've seen in my work with, as a King County staffer and as a parent, is the partnership between the Youth Soccer Association and the county parks in terms of the use of 60 acres. There's a soccer field, which is a case where a nonprofit and the county really work together to make sure that there's a facility that has been enhanced and serves a tremendous number of kids. And I'm sure that there are other opportunities that we can pursue, but those are the ones that come to mind.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you very much, Doug. We appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
Have a good evening. Okay, we're moving to Planning Commission, so.
Twice the number of candidates.
Are we voting on these people later?
Next week.
Oh, next week. Okay, thank you.
Thankfully, it's going to be long.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Could you introduce yourself and give us just a minute or so about your interest in the Planning Commission and in going forward? Thank you.
Sure. My name is Thomas Mudiankavil. I'm a civil engineer and I'm a professional engineer in the state of Washington. I have a degree, a master's degree in civil engineering as well as an MBA from University of Washington. Right now I work for a consulting firm called Parsons Brinkerhoff.
Excuse me, Thomas, could you move the microphone a little closer to your
Oh,
mouth?
sorry.
You can move it, actually.
Okay, can you? Right now I work for a consulting firm called Parsons Brinkerhoff, and I'm working on a project called Eastlink, which connects Seattle to Redmond. It's a light rail project. So that's my brief background.
And your interest in the Planning Commission?
I've been living in Sammamish for last 3.5 years.
Years, I'm sorry.
3.5 years.
Thank you.
And in the Seattle area for over 20 years, in Seattle as well as in Bothell. So based on my experience, especially working with a lot of municipal projects and the facilities what we have in Sammamish, I mean, it's really interesting for me, especially I'm passionate about the transportation field, the public transit as well as transportation and park and recreation, and protecting the shoreline, especially the city of Sammamish. So that's what made me to apply for this position.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Deputy Mayor Huckabee.
Got it that time. I'm looking for people who, as an old Planning Commission member,
Yeah.
who can be very collaborative in working with their fellow Planning Commission members, and who can gather information and package it in terms of a recommendation and pros and cons. Can you give us some, give us an experience that you've had where you've performed in that sort of a role and had to work with somebody just to present information on a project and to follow up with why it would be a good thing to do or why it would not be a good thing to do, or?
Sure, yeah. As a planning process for any project I'm involved, we collect all kinds of data, both engineering as well as other information. For Eastlink project, I was involved from initial planning through the whole EIS phase. So I was involved in conducting a lot of public outreach meetings and collecting and presenting information to the people and getting their feedback and using that feedback in our design process. So I've worked on that Eastlink as well as many other projects, and all these projects from the planning to even final design and construction, I've gone through the whole phase. So I'm very familiar with what information is needed for the project and how we can use it for the benefit of the people.
Thank you.
Any questions? Councilmember Odell?
Thank you. Can you give us a little bit about your vision for Sammamish in the future, what you'd like to see this place look like in 10 years? Given your transportation background, which I do share with you, by the way, have some comments about our own situation up here. But I'm primarily interested in how you would like to see Sammamish evolve in the next 10 years.
Sure. As I'm living in Sammamish and commuting to Seattle, I can see that public transportation in Sammamish is pretty minimum. I mean, to the best, I guess. I mean, there are challenges. I mean, the topography of the whole city doesn't help either. So there are certain corridors you have good bus services now, and but certain others don't have any. So I'm definitely looking into the opportunity to improve that and see how we can provide public transportation, especially when we are talking about some of the issues like affordable housing and things like that, and people definitely looking for public transportation. So that's one of the key specialty or challenges I'll be looking into. Similarly, shoreline, we have a beautiful shore, and there's a lot of developments happening. And one of the challenges to protect the shoreline and keep the beauty of it, as well as help to improve the whole shoreline. So that's a challenge. For example, the Sammamish Landing. I mean, that's one of the really good facility that has come up recently, but it has created many challenges, especially for transportation or traffic-related issues. I mean, there's no parking. People park along the shoulders, and the traffic during those times are pretty bad. And it also blocks the bike lanes. I mean, that corridor, East Lake Sammamish Parkway, is one of the most used bike traffic. And it's really creating a safety issue too, because the bikes are getting into the main lanes because it's blocked. So I think it could have been done a little bit better. So those are the things I'll be very much interested to input my expertise or experience based on many other projects.
Okay, Councilmember Gerard?
Thank you. Thomas, I'm a little concerned you commute to Seattle and you're working on a very challenging project,
Yes.
the East Link.
Yeah.
Do you feel, and the Planning Commission requires a lot of time, do you feel you have the capability of getting to the meetings and spending the time requisite to the Planning Commission?
I thought about that. Yeah, I mean, definitely I can commit myself, because I don't know, this is what, every once a month or bi-weekly meetings, I guess, the meeting. Yeah, I don't see an issue with that. I have flexible hours, and I can manage that. Yeah.
Okay, Councilmember Whitten?
I have a question for you. I think our planning commission works best when it's well-balanced between the different interest groups in our city. In the past, one point it was too environmentally friendly, then it became too property rights oriented, in my opinion anyway.
Yeah.
It's all personal. If you had something before you you had to vote on, and it was clear, black and white, one side was property rights and one side was the environment, and you had to choose, and that's the only thing that was compelling, which side would you choose?
For City of Sammamish, I would probably choose the environment.
The what?
The environment.
Thank you.
Another question? Councilmember Odell?
Thomas, have you been to any planning commission meetings?
Yes, I have attended few meetings, yeah.
Can you tell us how many?
Pardon me?
Can you tell us how many?
I would say four meetings in the last, maybe last year.
Okay.
All right. My question was going to be Councilmember Jerens.
Yeah.
Councilmember Keller, you have a question?
I actually, kind of as a follow-up to Councilmember Witten, when you were asking about the environment, I'm curious, when I look at the list of projects that you've worked on and the things that you've built, there's obviously been a situation where the environment was an issue, that you were crossing some path. Can you give me an example of one where you identified it in building the project or engineering it, where you had to work around it?
A good example is the Eastlink project, where we had to go through Bellevue, and one of the alignment option was going through Mercer Slough. And there's also one of the historic property called Winter's House. I don't know how many people know that, but those were one of the key two things which controlled all the alignment options we looked through the whole project. And just because of that, I mean, the cost, I mean, especially through that corridor, must have gone so much, but we still were able to manage without impacting those two. And City of Sammamish, it's known for its natural beauty, and it's considered one of the most livable cities because of the lakes, the trees, and the greeneries. I mean, you have to protect that, because that's the reputation of the city, and people come to the city because of those things. So I think that's why it's really important to maintain that while you're considering all the other developments.
Very good, thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Well, thank you for coming, and thank you for applying.
Thanks for giving the opportunity. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Nice to see you again. Could you go ahead and give us your name and give us a minute or so about your interest in the Planning Commission, some of your background?
Okay. My name is Cynthia Cross, and before we begin, I just want to welcome Councilmember Keller. Welcome, and welcome back, Deputy Mayor Huckabee. And to all of you, thank you for your service. I know this is a very thankless job, and you put a lot of time into it. I just want to say thank you. So I moved to Sammamish with my husband about 20 years ago. We raised our family here, and when we first moved here, I worked at Microsoft and worked in marketing and advertising. After a little while, decided I wanted to take a break from that, focus on my family, and then as I began to look at returning to professional life, I decided that I wanted to do something more inspiring than marketing and advertising, so I chose planning. So last year, I finished my Master of Urban Planning and have been, I really enjoyed that program. It's a contemporary planning program with a lot of information about contemporary planning issues, a lot of environmental planning, social justice, and also things like economic development, comprehensive planning, and so forth, community outreach. So I really enjoyed being a mature student and being able to go back and learn that as an adult. And then during my time in school, I was able to get a little bit of experience working in a variety of jurisdictions, City of Bellevue, in transportation planning. I worked project for Seattle, project for Sammamish County. But perhaps most relevant, I also got a chance to work for the City of Sammamish, so I worked in Cameron Girls, Community Development Department on a project basis, pretty much exclusively, I think, on the comprehensive plan, almost exclusively on community outreach. So just on a project basis, and I've gotten a chance to see how the planning staff works, and that's one of the reasons I decided to apply for this, is because we have a highly competent staff and a dedicated council. So I did also recently get a full-time, well, not a full-time, but a part-time permanent position. So now that I know what my professional schedule will be like, since that position is part-time, it leaves me time to dedicate to a planning commission position. And that's I'm the new staff person for a farmland preservation group in the Snoqualmie Valley, just right south the urban growth boundary. In fact, I think I saw your name on one of our donation lists, so the Snoqualmie Valley Preservation Alliance, so full disclosure. I think it was your husband, actually. So I thought you might recognize that group. So I'm their first...
You thoroughly enjoyed the event this summer.
Oh, well, yes, excellent, yeah. So I just started as a staff person, so it's an exciting job for me, and I'm very excited about it, but it's a small group and part-time, which leaves me time to devote to this, I know, rather at times onerous task of planning commission. So real quickly, I also just want to say one of the things I think that makes me a good candidate for this position is I like to think that while I do have my biases, I like to think that I'm fair and thorough and patient to deliberate through sometimes a complicated process. And I think the people in Sammamish and the council deserve that kind of patience to go through the process. So I like to think that I'm methodical, a good balance between being data-driven, but also exercising good judgment. So thank you for listening.
Any questions? Councilmember Jared.
What was your event in the swim team?
Oh, I was a 200 butterflyer. I'm so glad you asked.
Very good.
You're good. Any other questions?
Oh, how about some harder questions? No.
Do you have a follow-up on that?
Do you want to take a run?
Nancy, you have a question?
I have one.
Yeah.
We like to see a balanced planning commission in terms of representing different interest groups and segments of the community. Sometimes in the past we've been too environmentally skewed, sometimes we've been too property rights skewed, so I'm hoping we can get some better balance this time. If you had a controversial topic, and the only two items that you could consider, so you can't qualify this in any way and wiggle out of it, would you take an environmental position or an environmental position? Recognizing you couldn't
Did you say an environmental position or an environmental position?
I mean, or property rights.
Environmental.
Oh, that was an easy one.
Oh, that's a good question. If that were an easy question, you wouldn't need a planning commission or 7 council members.
That's even a better answer, but I want to know an answer to my question. Which
I
side?
can appreciate the fact that you want to, I'll tell you what, if I give you an answer, can I also follow up with it with I would be...
It's like an cross-examination question where you have to give a yes or no.
It would be insincere of me to say that I would not take an environmental position if I had to guess on the bias. But I have to say, and I appreciate that you've pressed for a specific answer, but I would like to say that I would hope that the job that I would do, deliberating on matters brought forth by council, nobody would really be able to discern my biases, because I would like to look at every matter in its own right. And I think it's really important, not only because you want the right outcome, but you also, that process is so critical to making everyone be able to live with the outcome. So I hate to come down on one bucket or the other. I don't like being asked to be in a bucket, and in theory, it would be insincere of me to suggest that I'm not an environmentalist, and yet I really think that the role of the Planning Commission is to set those things aside and deliberate every issue on its own merits. I think that's important for both long-term and short-term
But when
results.
all the results come back to the council level skewed one way or another, whichever way it is, then you look twice at it. So that's where.
Any other questions? Or Councilmember Odell?
Why don't we have Bob go first? He had his hand up too.
Bob, you were anxious? I didn't see you.
Yes, you've been working on the outreach program with
Yes.
the community development program right now. So could you describe, what your impression of the community input so far has been?
Yes, sure. I'll try to summarize. I know that's you got about 30 or 40 minutes. No, I'm just kidding. It's difficult to summarize the kind of qualitative data that we've been collecting, and we've been trying to kind of have a combination of both quantitative so that we can have nice charts, but also qualitative. I would say a couple different things. One is there's a lot of conflict between even what one individual will want. I would say there's a few emerging themes, and it seems to me no matter what side people fall on, they all like the trees. Everybody wants the trees. And the other thing is, I would say that there are a lot of people that would like to see more services, and there are other people that are a little bit more, I would say skeptical about the growth. And of course, there's also a pretty common response is people to ask for things that are not even allowable by law. I mean, that you couldn't even do, things that violate state and federal constitution. So that becomes a little bit tricky, and it's hard to answer. And in fact, I've gotten some coaching on camera, and you may not even remember that, about how to turn that back to people in a productive way, as opposed to saying, oh, we can't do that, so just kind of engage them. So I don't know if I certainly have more information, but I don't think you have time to.
I appreciate that.
Councilmember Odell?
Thank you. Cynthia, thank you for applying, particularly after you've had the experience of working for Cameron. Actually, that's totally a jest.
No.
You've been a 20-year resident of Sammamish, and I've lived here just slightly longer than you have. In the last 20 years, we've seen, if you look at Sammamish, Issaquah, Redmond, a tremendous amount of change on all three of us. But particularly, Redmond has had a major character change in terms of what its downtown looks like. Issaquah has basically built a downtown where nothing existed on the Highlands to some extent. And now we have the Central Issaquah plan looming it down there as well. What is your vision for what Sammamish, you'd like to see Sammamish look like in 20 years?
I've had a lot of time to think about that because we've put that question to a lot of people. I would say that, of course, we want to preserve the treasure that we have, the surroundings, the natural environment. I think is quite unique and precious. But I do believe that we can accommodate both the growth that's required by law as well as the growth that just comes from the demand of living in this environment. And one of the reasons I went into planning is because I actually believe that there are win-win solutions. I know that sometimes there's kind of an either-or, but I think that customer demand or consumer demand is changing. People want to be in a little bit more lively environment, especially as the population ages in the city of Sammamish. I mean, 65 and over population is the fastest growing segment within the age demographics. So I think that having a place where we preserve those the neighborhoods that we've had, the natural environment we have, but where we can accommodate both the demands for what people who live here would like to see and services. I mean, I'm almost an empty nester. I'd really like to downsize, but I don't really want to leave Sammamish. And so I think having more opportunities to do that and stay part of my community would really be ideal.
Any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Thanks
Thank
for
you so
applying.
much for your consideration.
Thank you. Hello.
Hi.
Why don't you introduce yourself and give us about a minute or so about your interest in the Planning Commission, a little bit about your background.
Yeah, well, my name's Melinda Weeder, and I actually grew up in the area, graduated from Skyline High School, and went off to Gonzaga for undergrad, and so I'm a little competitive around basketball season. And finished up law at Seattle University a few years ago, and then got employed at a law firm downtown Seattle, which I love, and my husband and I moved back to this area because this is where we want to plant our roots and start the next chapter of our life. And I've always been interested in local government and public service. it's always been a passion of mine. And I thought this would be a great time to explore what that was like. And so I got a chance to meet with Kathy and Mabubel from the Planning Commission and saw their passion and got to watch a commission meeting in November and also loved the process of what it looked like. And so that was encouraging to me. And so after some more thought, I thought this would be a great time to apply and see if it would work out.
Any questions? Kathy?
Yes. We have many people on either side of the line, very property rights oriented or very environmental. For example, on the tree ordinance, some people want to be able to remove all their trees if they choose. Other people want us to enforce regulations to require people to put trees on their property. You will hear that at the Planning Commission. How are you going to, or can you give us an example of how you've worked in that environment where you have people on exactly the opposite side and how you've worked to try to bring them together or try to find a path that might be in the middle?
Well, you know, as a lawyer, I do that basically every day. I do that a lot. Whether my practice works with insurance companies, where I have duties to them, then I have my clients who are the actual defendants, who have their also interests, and usually those are aligned, but when they're not, I have to do a lot of explaining back and forth. And when it comes to sort of environment versus property rights, I mean, I grew up here. One of my favorite parts and why we moved back was how close it was to nature, how much that was really involved. And so I think having that natural presence and protecting that is extremely important, especially as the city continues to develop and feel the pressures of, continued growth, which is wonderful to have families moving in and, continue to encourage that part. But it mostly, so that's where I approach that kind of question if I was on the commission. And then working with people who are at opposite ends, a lot of it's just active listening. Most people are coming to their opinions based on their own experience. And how I bridge or build bridges is by asking a lot of questions. And usually then people will come to what's actually bothering them or what their fear is, and then you can really talk about that then usually find common ground. Is my experience and how I, involve with, argument and disagreement, which actually I think is healthy most of the time because it's good to have different opinions.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Odell?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for applying, Linda. We really do appreciate that. Question for you. You've grown up here, and over the course of growing up here, you've had the opportunity to watch the changes not only in Sammamish, but also Issaquah and Redmond. Redmond's nature is changing quickly, particularly the downtown area. And in your time here, you've seen the rise of Issaquah Highlands, and you're probably familiar with the Central Issaquah plan, at least to some extent. Looking ahead another 20 years, what would you envision Sammamish looking like compared to what you've experienced so far?
Well, you're right. I have watched the city grow a lot. And I think what I like about Sammamish when I think about it is if there feels like a quality here that sometimes I don't feel when I'm driving around in Redmond. Redmond's gotten very, big in business with their downtown, and the Issaquah Highlands, that's just blown up. And I think that business is good to have. It's just how much you have. And so I think this city is going to have to balance that some more, especially as you get more families. I think the vision I have is very much in how the city's developed. I mean, the library and the development of the community center that's going to be here, I think those are wonderful additions and match that balance between the continued growth and also, in respect for the families and, the individuals you want to have, as well as just sort of the commitment to the environment here too and that footprint. So I don't really have a specific vision, except that I like what I see the city has grown to so far. And I think that there's just the balance of, balancing the environment interest versus the building interest is going to be big, especially where the city of Sammamish is. It's sort of on that border where the forests are, North Bend, and there's a lot more forest and nature there. So I think the city's going to have to, think about that more as it develops. I hope that answered your question. Lawyers tend to not answer questions, so I hope I did.
It does, thank you.
Councilmember Keller?
Thank you for your application. I have a question. My experience with attorneys, the workload is very, very demanding, and the Planning Commission, not only is it meeting on occasion, it's also reading and doing the homework and that sort of thing. And I'm wondering how you'll balance the time requirements for the Planning Commission with your career. And I notice here that you were represented on the Puget Sound Regional Councils. So is that something that took up a lot of your time? And maybe you could explain how you did balance that.
Well, that's something I thought a lot about with my husband and before I submitted my application, because I think that when you're on something as important as a planning commission supporting the city council, I think you need to be able to commit a lot of time. And when I was meeting with Mabubal, he was talking about, you get a ton of stuff to read every week. In law school, I learned how to read really fast. And I'm still pretty good at that. But my job actually is pretty balanced. I'm in-house counsel, which technically means I'm very unusual for a lawyer, especially a new lawyer, in that I have basically an 8-hour workday. So I have lots of time. I am totally in love with taking the bus into Seattle, and that gives me plenty of time there to read. I also just love to read, and I love to learn. So when you're interested in something you're reading about and you're committed to something, you always find time. But that's, I do have a lot of time at this point. And I found right now, one of the reasons I also applied is because I feel like I do have the time in that I work 8 hours a day and I come home and me and my husband have a wonderful life, and we have lots of interests that we pursue on the weekends, but I still have a lot of free time. And I wanted to fill it up with something that I would enjoy, that would challenge me, and that would allow me to serve a community that I've loved growing up in.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you for applying, and thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
And go Zags.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Why don't you introduce yourself and give us about a minute or so about your background and particularly about your interest in the Planning Commission.
Okie doke. My name is Catherine Lowe, and I started my first career as a speech therapist in the public schools, and then I had kids. I had twins, and decided parenting was a challenge enough of a career. But when my kids reached high school, I realized I needed another focus for my life, and I went to Bellevue College to kind of try to figure out what that was going to be, and I eventually ended up at the Evans School getting a degree in public administration, and my specialty was environment and environmental policy. I got the environmental management certificate, worked on a team looking at greenhouse gas emissions and their reduction plan for Bellevue. And I'm fascinated with nature. I love astronomy and biology. Oceanography was fascinating. I really want to bring my skills to the commission. What else can I say? I've lived here 22 years. I predate the city, but I've been fascinated watching how everything has unfolded, and learning about government in my MPA program kind of got me a lot more interested in government, and so I've been to some planning commission meetings and realized there was an opening, and I thought this might be a good way to use my skills.
Okay. Any questions from the council? Who's first? Councilmember Odell.
Thank you. Catherine, you lived here a while, so you've had the chance to watch the the changes that occurred on the east side, and particularly the area in the plateau and the surrounding communities of Issaquah and Redmond. Looking ahead 20 years, what is the view you would have of what Sammamish would look like.
20 years, I would hope to see a wider variety of housing, more affordable housing. I know that's a big goal within the city. I would also like to see a lot of our open space, our green space, our natural places preserved as much as possible. And I think a big role of the Planning Commission is evaluating how that can happen and making the recommendations to the council. I would like to see maybe I have a wider variety of services, I guess. We have 2 major commercial centers, and it seems it's grocery stores and fast food and a couple of dry cleaners. I'm not sure what else there could be here. Maybe it's not appropriate because those services are available relatively close. I would, a big thing I would like to see is more public transportation, more bus routes. I'm not quite sure how the Planning Commission and Council can work together to make that happen, but that would be what I would like to see. I would also like to see better, safer routes for pedestrians and bicyclists. I think it's important if it can't just be buses. People have to have a way to get to the bus and a safe way, especially for our young people. I would like to see greener infrastructure, more solar.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Councilmember Keller?
I see here, you were the president of the Timberline Community Club.
Yes, I was.
And you mentioned here several times about mediated, contentious issues and that sort of thing. Could you describe how you don't have to bring up one issue, but describe how you would resolve disagreements?
The disagreements, yeah. I also said in my materials, I have training and experience in conflict resolution. I took 2 classes at the U and I haven't done it on a formal basis. That was one of the examples of how I've used it kind of in the work that I do just on an everyday basis. The first thing, the primary thing to have in mind when there's a conflict is respect. And even if you disagree with somebody, you can respect their point of view, you can respect their humanity, and work to find your common interests. And from what I've seen, it's amazing how easy it actually is to find a common interest. Within the neighborhood, everybody, almost all the residents appreciated that their property values were maintained by the actions of their neighbors, maintaining their own properties. And it was the responsibility of the homeowners association to maintain the public spaces, the common areas. But we also had the responsibility to kind of make sure that the residents were taking care of their own property. So that was the common interest, was maintaining property values. And it doesn't matter what your politics are, what your values are, property value, you don't want your house to lose value. So we were always able to come at least down to the property value and then work with the other disagreements, finding solutions that made both parties not necessarily happy or get what they want fully, but that they could buy into.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
All right,
Thank you for applying, and thank you for coming tonight.
Is Frank here?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Mr. Blau, could
Yes.
you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Okay.
I think we all know you, but
Yeah.
introduce yourself anyway.
Everybody's coming in,
and,
they're all saying, hey, Frank, hey, Frank. So my name is Frank
Introduce
Blau.
yourself and go ahead and give us about a minute
Okay.
on your background, and of course, we have some information on that, but
Okay.
and your interest in the Planning Commission.
Okay. So my name is Frank Blau. I've lived in Sammamish for about 16 years, actually even before it was Sammamish. And I live here with my wife, and my kids have lived with us, moved in with us when they were teenagers, and now they're off in school and doing their own thing. And I've been involved with city stuff kind of from day one, and originally around a lot of parks issues and things like that. And but last couple years, I've been involved with the Beaver Lake Management District Board. I've been on that for about 2.5 years now, something like that, maybe 3. And realizing that the decision-making process, a lot of it that comes through the Planning Commission, and a lot of the interesting conversations I found myself gravitating towards were conversations happening around the Planning Commission and that kind of stuff. And thought it would be a good time to, once again, join that as a citizen. My background is in data processing and information management and what's called business intelligence. And I like to think that I make a lot of my decisions based on data, and that's kind of what I help our clients do. Our clients are typically people who have far too much data and not enough information about it. And so that process of how you turn large amounts of data into useful action is something I'm very familiar with, and I think that applies well to the Planning Commission because there's a lot of data, and you often see, when I come to these things, there's like big binders full of stuff that have to be distilled down into decisions, and that's kind of something that I do on a day-to-day basis in my career. So that's kind of who I am, and well.
Thank you. Any questions from the council? Councilmember Whitten.
Mr. Blau, I've always enjoyed your involvement. Thank you.
Thank you.
How would you deal with conflict resolution?
So, interestingly enough, as part of the Beaver Lake Management District, we haven't had a lot of conflict. It's kind of like we monitor lake quality, right? I mean, what's the conflict there? Over the last year, we had an opportunity to weigh in on some of the ECA stuff and some very, what I considered kind of minutia, right? Language changes of little things, and we decided as a group that we would invite a public process. And wow, was that eye-opening? I actually got called stupid. It was exciting. Yeah, I was pretty pleased with that. But what I realized is that as a public body, your job is to listen, and to not react to it. It's that almost Zen sort of thing where you have to say, this is information too. If someone's angry at you and if there's conflict, that's a source of information, and you have to see it as an opportunity to take in that information and do something useful with it. I'm not saying you can always diffuse it in a way which is going to make everybody happy, but you can certainly take that anger and that emotion or whatever that conflict is and treat that as information that you can use in making your decisions.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Odell.
Hi, Frank. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for applying. Thank you. Question for you. I noticed that you're really interested in the comp plan, which is good because that's what you'd be dealing with for quite a little while in the future. You've lived here quite a while, just as I have, and we've both seen a fair amount of change, not only in Sammamish, but also in our neighbors to the north, neighbors to the north, Redmond, and our neighbor to the south, Issaquah. Redmond's process of completely rebuilding their whole downtown. Issaquah has built the Highlands out of nothing, and now they're proceeding with the Central Issaquah plan. Looking ahead for the next 20 years or so, by the time we get to year 20, what would you envision Sammamish looking like?
I don't see us, I think of these three cities as very distinct, and I don't think there should be a race to become more like one of them than the other. But what I see for our city is the things that make it unique. There's a lot of, the one thing up here that we have that makes us unique, I think, is our parks make us very unique, and our housing makes us very unique. And the nature of it is, one of my older sisters is a writer, and she asked me the other day, what do you think of are the best main streets that you've been to? She's writing an article about Main Street USA, what is it really? And all these cities that we talked about, because I've lived in all over the world. And I don't really see Sammamish being that. I don't really see us being like, Main Street USA, kind of, even in the sense, the way that I see I said Issaquah is a place where I think Main Street, Front Street in Issaquah is just dynamite. You got, Fisher Meats, and you got all these great things. This great, you got a real music store there. It's very exciting. Sammamish I see as being a little bit different. I think we need to have more of a town so that people feel like there is a center to us. But I don't think it needs to be just one thing. Just sort of like a main street where everything has to be within this little space. I think we can do interesting things in smaller pockets in Sammamish that I think would be interesting. So in 20 years, wow, gosh. I would like us to be smarter in 20 years. I would like us to be smarter about our use of resources, in particular energy. I think there's a lot of things that can be done to use energy more efficiently in communities. So in terms of a culture, I think what would be good for us to look at is how can we create enough sustainable stuff in our community so that it can continue to grow, but not so much that it's forcing everything into like say either a Redmond, the way the Redmond builds up, or even the way Issaquah is sort of expanding. I don't really see us becoming that. I don't see 5-story buildings, for example, in Sammamish. I don't really see us becoming that sort of like box stores and stuff like that. So,
thank you.
Other questions? I think we're good. Thank you for one more, Councilmember Keller.
A little slow to raise my hand because most of the questions that I had really were around your experience with the Beaver Lake management, and you've really given us a big background, but a comprehensive background of your experience there, I think. But I'm curious, what would your peers think about you? What do you think they would think about your contributions in that committee?
I'm kind of what you see is what you get. I've never really, I've gotten up and spoken at lots of these meetings. That's why everybody sort of knows me. And I think they would know me as someone who speaks his mind, and not only speaks his mind, but, speaks for a good vision, a good vision for what I believe in my heart. I don't think anyone would, I'm not going to run for council because I'm not really into being elected, but I think that I do have an interest in being heard. And I think that's a different perspective. And so I think my peers would think, well, there's somebody who speaks his mind, but also is willing to look at data, is willing to look at this volume of information that we're being given and being able to distill it and also communicate. I'm a pretty good communicator. I'm a writer. I'm able to put my thoughts expressively, and sometimes very expressively if you read the editorial pages. But I feel very strongly that being able to communicate is an important part of the job, and both with your peers, but also with you guys, with the council and with the community in a way that makes people feel heard and makes you as a council feel properly advised. So.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? All right. Seeing none, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Applying.
Yep.
I believe that's our last candidate for tonight.
Oh, Manuel Soto's not coming?
I don't.
No, he's not here.
He wasn't, yeah. So, city manager, I guess we've already blown our break, so I think we should move on to the next topic.
Fire study, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
We don't have to fill these out, these forms?
No, this next week.
For your own use.
Next week, cool.
We'll be looking at those candidates, I believe, next Tuesday.
Sure. Next topic is on our study session agenda is a fire study. This is our second study sessions with this council. We had multiple study sessions, obviously, with the previous council. We believe that we got a list of questions from council members. As last week, Thursday, and we also received some recent questions. I'm waiting for my deputy city manager to come over here. He is ready to make the presentation on this while Wes is tracking him down. Per the council resolution, we're scheduled to approve the interlocal agreement on the 21st, which is our last council meeting this month. So I'm hoping that we answer the questions tonight and then we move on to the next phase. And obviously that if the council members still have questions, we want to follow up with those. I'm going to turn it over to our Deputy City Manager, Lyman Howard, to make a quick PowerPoint presentation. Not a 2 hours presentation, but rather maybe 10 minutes presentation. Lyman.
I'll do my very best.
This is what we missed last week.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Wes Collins is here also to assist with the questions that have been proposed by or posed to us by council. So
Thank you.
when I'm, Wes will be right behind me here as we move forward. Great. Thank you all very much. Okay, just we're going to try to get back into things where we left off last week. I just wanted to remind you where we are with the ILA and with Exhibit A, based on all the hard work and negotiations that council members and staff, city manager, and other representatives from other Eastside Fire and Rescue board members. Bottom line is we essentially feel that we've achieved better cost equity for all the partners across the board. They are phasing in calls for service over a 2-year period, and also there's been an acknowledgement of things other than assessed value being factors in the funding model. We also are factoring in the sharing of move-up station costs, which is something new in addition as well. Combined, those in the first year of savings, we estimate to be about $352,000, and then in second and subsequent year savings of about $412,000. We're anticipating savings over the term of the agreement to be about $2.8 million to Sammamish. Updates?
That's from the current status, correct? From the current agreement, 2.8 million?
From the current agreement,
Thank
under
you.
the current, or based on projections for using 2014 numbers, yes. Also an update,
Excuse me, Lyman, were those numbers inflation adjusted, or is that just a?
No, those are point-in-time numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Just to follow up on some of the discussion that we had before, Eastside Fire and Rescue Board actually voted to accept the suggested language changes that we talked about last week in relationship to the return of property section and referred it to the attorneys to wordsmith. The terminology used was originally 1 year, and our council suggested that it be rather than a 1-year notice, essentially to be the end of the term or expiration of the term. Additionally, the partner governing boards are voting to accept this clarifying language. And the third point I wanted to make is that Eastside Fire and Rescue Board embraced the concept of having the operating committee
utilizing expertise from staff members. This was not, however, incorporated into the ILA, but is incorporated into the work of the Eastside Fire and Rescue Board and staff. Currently, they're working on the details of that and have actually decided that they want to look at potentially doing the same thing for some of the other committees, the HR committee and some of the other finance committees.
Finance
as well.
and operations.
Yeah.
Would be the
So,
other one.
Basically, they want to utilize the expertise that's available to them outside of the actual board.
Councilmember, I'm
Yes.
sorry. Deputy Mayor.
As a council member.
That's true, that's true.
Last week, I was at the fire board meeting, and there was a discussion around whether the change in when the fire equipment came back, whether that was substantive or non-substantive, and whether all the agencies had to vote on that. So the decision has been made by the attorney?
Well, the recommendation or the discussion was that the idea was to err on the side of doing it right. And so, in fact, I believe all the boards have decided that they will vote or will go back and vote for that language change. There was some discussion whether or not it was substantive enough to do that, but just to err and be safe and explicit on that would probably be the best way to go.
Will that all take place by the 21st?
We'll get to that. We've got a variety of information that we've received from the partners, and Wes may actually even have an update. They were trying to get some updated information earlier today. Also, to clarify, the ILA, actually, part of the discussion related to levels of service, particularly as it related to Station 81 last week. Station 81 being designated as a move-up station only reflects the current operating guidelines that are in place. There is no perceived or no planned change in the way that, in fact, it operates. Essentially, what the move-up station idea is that they will receive a funding credit that will reflect current operations. So it's not a degradation of service to our community. Yes.
So are you saying really, is it?
Good.
Are you saying that really always has been a move-up station?
It always has
That
been a
term
move-up
is
station,
actually
but we're
new?
recognizing it by way of a credit at this juncture. Yes.
Do we have
And then
the-
also,
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
Do we have the opportunity at some future point to change that? I know when we end up redoing Snake Hill at some point in time, that's going to isolate a large part of the community. It's going to be and that community is difficult to serve now. So is there that option in the agreement at this point in time to maybe have the move-up station be 83 or 82 or somebody else so that we have equipment in place at that time to serve that community?
I think
I think so.
Very
And
good
that's
question, Deputy
fine.
Mayor.
Wes doesn't have to answer tonight. He hasn't really thought it through, I'm sure.
Well, it
Or
would
have
be
you-
an adjustment to the Exhibit A. So, because Exhibit A mentions the two move-up stations in specific. And so you would have to unanimously change who the move-up station was in Exhibit A and all the language in the interlocal agreement that goes around that. So that's how it would happen. So if we saw something coming down the road, or if we just see the response patterns change where we're not moving 72 up or we're not moving 81 up, then that's something that would have to be addressed by the board, and they would have to look at it and then say, okay, we're moving up these other two stations more often, so let's change the funding model to reflect that.
So that's a board decision. It can't be a Sammamish decision.
Yeah, that would be a board decision because the funding formula falls inside the interlocal agreement.
Well,
Councilmember,
in terms of just another station being the move-up station in lieu of.
Councilmember Witten?
Addressing a related issue, I feel like I've been shut out of the process in terms of the ILA changes from this council, not from the EF&R in the past year. but that's a different issue. But the one change I think that Don did get into the agreement when he was negotiating it for us is that this operating committee would be looking at levels of service. And I was one of those people who did spark that language going into the operating committee nature of what it was supposed to look into, with the particular thought of Station 83. So it wouldn't be decided as part of the ILA at this time. But when the operating committee goes forward in the future, like it hopefully will do, it will have the time and the resources to start looking at various issues that are of concern to us, like the levels of service, which include the move-up issue, which I think is very critical to your neighborhood and to Sammamish.
Well,
So, I mean, it's not, there's no way you could do it as a black and white before any reasonable time with the operating committee, because it would, you know, you move one peg and your whole domino stack falls down. So, but it is something that they're tasked in the operating committee with looking at. And I think certainly Sammamish's interest in it will be important, who our reps are to that, to...
Well, there was a significant discussion around the operating committee, who should be on it, whether it should be open meetings or closed meetings. And so there's nothing in the ILA at this point in time, so.
No, there
I think
isn't,
it's been
but I
taken
mean-
under, my understanding is that they've taken it under advisement. It's not final at this point.
Anybody over here? I guess my concern going forward is, if we're going to continue with those two stations as the move-up stations, what are our backups for those stations, and what does that look like? And because we do have, you know, at least a temporary gap in service, and how do we approach that?
Well, I think it's important for the council to understand that all stations move up, that the stations are moving, the system moves stations constantly as there's holes in response patterns. And so the idea was that these two stations tended to be more of a move-up station than others. Does that mean they do it, that they're the only ones? No. Station 71 moves up a lot, 83 moves, 72 moves, 71 moves, 78 moves, and they all are moving. We had a fire just the other night, and 78 was up in 83's station. So the system is moving stations around all the time. And anytime a station goes out of service, either for a call or for a move-up, the computer system, CAD, automatically finds the closest unit and backfills. Sometimes they backfill by actually moving units around. Sometimes it's, you know, a Redmond unit might move into Sammamish, or a Sammamish unit might move to Redmond or to Bellevue, or even as far north as Bothell or Woodinville. So the system is in constant motion. What we try to do is fill the holes, make sure that calls do not go unanswered, and obviously as more resources go out, more resources get called in for other calls, response times suffer. And that's just the nature of the game. We can't have so many, we can't afford to have as many stations as we would like to have. We'd like to have one in every corner, and then everybody would have, you know, 1 minute service, but we can't afford that. So I think it's just important to understand this system is intertied, interlaced, moves around, units move all the time. This was the ad hoc committee's proposal to address move-up stations, because it seemed to be that Issaquah and Sammamish move their stations more often than anybody else. Whether it's 81 or 72, you want to call it 71 and 82, it was the way the ad hoc committee addressed that issue, more than a specific station that moves up any more than another station.
Well, we have more stations, too.
Well, those two partners tend to have the most stations, so you have the most ability to move up stations, so.
Councilmember Odell?
Thank you. I have 2 or 3 questions which are kind of interrelated, if you I may beg the chair's patience. Lyman, what is the amount we get for Station 81's move up? What's the dollar value of that?
I'm afraid I do not have that information at my fingertips at this particular point. I'd have to look that up, I'm afraid.
Okay,
I
Tom, do you
apologize.
remember?
Well, it's 25% of the cost of operating a station, isn't that right, Wes?
Divided by
So that's
5.
So that's like 500,000 or 400,000.
Well, it would be 25% of the station cost, but then it also comes into the assessed value is also part of that formula.
Okay, well, we don't need to try to figure it out real time here, but I would like to know the number. Wes, I appreciate your explaining for the benefit of everyone, the juggling that goes on when something happens around the system. And this is real, and it's done all the time. Eventually, though, you run out of people, and so you have to shut something down. And the way it's done is based on fundamentally call volumes. If you run out of people, either because of some activity going on in some part of the system, or because the flu's hit and you don't have enough bodies to keep everything open and you brown out or blackout. The history has been that you tend to pick on I think it's 71 and 81 are the two that tend to get hammered quite a bit. The problem I have with this is similar to what Kathy is saying, and that is that when 81 goes dark for whatever reason, it's figuratively dark, the whole shoreline down Lake Sammamish Parkway goes from basically green to yellow, and in some cases very red. And what this means is response times go from good to marginal to not good. I would hate to be a resident down on the Parkway, even though 81 isn't that active as much as some other stations, at the time when I need that particular service. And if my response is delayed by 5 or 10 minutes because 81 is dark, then this is a big issue for the people that live there, because it can mean the difference between life and death. And most of the calls are EMS, which are time critical. I would hope that one of the things that gets looked at by this operations group is another way to deal with this without having to do what we've been doing. The number of times this happens is not all that large. It's, I believe, several dozen times a year at max. But that's probably 1 month out of the year the station's not there. I was one of the people pushing for the revised formula out of fairness, financial fairness to our taxpayers, because I felt, and I still feel, that we were subsidizing some of our partners unfairly. Yes, the situation's gotten better, but it's not perfect yet. End of speech.
Okay. And can,
I was just going to offer, if you'd like, we'll continue with the presentation. One of the
just
things
save your questions unless there's one that we
One of the
really
things
need right
we
now.
were going to do is go through the questions that we had received from council. And we received questions from council yesterday morning and also again this morning.
From one counselor? I apologize. I was in an all-day tax seminar yesterday learning about all the penalties associated with the Affordable Care Act. I would have much rather been looking at this than doing my questions.
So let's save your questions
anytime you have a
unless
question
it's
about that, I'll
especially
answer.
the council member Huckabee.
And continue, Lyman.
Okay, thank you very much. And then also, I did want to reiterate and come back and revisit the fact that the legal structure consideration that has been mentioned for consideration at a later date is nonprofit as opposed to not-for-profit.
Right.
So,
And I did read through that paperwork, and I'm very clear on the
okay.
organization there.
All right, thank you very much. Then I'm not going to delve into this on the calendar highlights. Essentially, we're here at January 14th. We're doing a study session, and then based on the council calendar as it stands now, the 21st, we intend to bring back consideration of the resolution to accept the interlocal agreement next week on the 21st. Status of the partners as it relates to the ILA passage. District 10 did previously pass the ILA as it was previously proposed, and they are slated, I believe, to reapprove that tomorrow with the language changes that clarify the transfer of property at the end or the expiration of the term rather than 1 year. District 38, do we have an update? We do not have an update yet. They have not yet considered it, but we're working to determine the timing of Fire District 38. City of North Bend did in fact pass the ILA on January 7th. They are slated to reapprove that.
Tell Wes.
I'm sorry, what?
I just want to make a clarification on it for you guys in the city of North Bend. We looked at the language and the way we passed it gave us enough room that there is no need for us to reapprove it. It's been
Okay.
approved, and so it's,
Great.
it should not be brought back again.
Fabulous. Thank you for the clarification. Again, then also at City of Issaquah, the Services and Safety Committee did discuss it on January 7th, and the council is slated to vote on the ILA on January 21st, the same night that we're slated to as well. Again, ILA review, just to step back, the ILA essentially is intended to set the operating guidelines. It will not cover every scenario that is out there. It is a 7-year agreement, and we fully expect that over the 7 years, there will be adjustments that would be made potentially to the ILA and or to the administrative processes and procedures that everybody works on a regular basis. So again, it's not set in stone to the extent that it needs to be changed. The partners have worked very hard to come up with an interlocal agreement that meets the needs of all the partners as it stands now, but based on conversations that have been observed, they're willing to fix what needs to be fixed when it needs to be fixed. Okay, we've got some questions that we thought we'd go through, and Wes is going to take the lead on these as we go through, and I apologize, there are many, so if council gets tired, we can try to move through these a little bit faster. But one of the questions was, if a new station is needed to provide coverage to the area, who will be responsible for funding the capital expenses for its construction?
And that would fall in the example of Station 73 issue. If a new station is needed, the party that is requiring the station would be responsible to pay for the station and the equipment that goes into it.
Okay.
They could work with other parties that are part of that station and try to do an interlocal agreement or something outside of EFR and jointly build it, kind of like North Bend at 38 did.
Okay. If additional major equipment, for example, pumpers, ladder trucks, aerial trucks, aid cars, are needed for a new station because of a change in the nature or types of structures in the coverage area, who will pay for the upfront costs of that capital?
And again, that would be the party that is requiring the equipment.
City Manager, could I ask a question? Do we need a motion to, I'm going to ask you as parliamentarian to extend the meeting beyond 10 o'clock if necessary?
Yes, if we
Okay.
need the...
Do I have a motion?
I can't make a motion, I need a council to make.
I said, do I have a motion? Past 10 o'clock if necessary.
What does that mean?
Well, to 10 o'clock we can go already. but what?
We still have an executive session for about at least 10 or 15 minutes.
So till 10:30?
So moved.
You have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, we're good
Thank
till
you.
10:30.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Can I ask my other related question to this building issue? Because we now know, which we didn't know 10 years ago, that we live on the Seattle Fault, and that Station 81 is really right on top of that fault. And I know, Wes, you've been looking at some other ways, maybe to rearrange stations, how to provide other service. Have you looked at that particular building to see if it is stable? Has it been retrofit for earthquake? Is it, because of that location, is that something that you or we should be looking at, finding another location for that station?
I'd have to look back at, it was remodeled, I believe, in 2003, 2004, and I don't know if they did any seismic retrofitting at that time. So I'd have to go back and look at the plans and see if they did anything. But yeah, the building could be seismic retrofitted, or we could, as part of a broader plan, look at moving that station eventually. It's the oldest station in the system. It has a few things that is driving it to be kind of obsolete. So moving that station sometime in the future is probably something that the council and the staff are going to have to discuss, and then, whether or not we rebuild there or move it to a better location.
How do we get that discussion and that information in process? The reason I kind of pick on this a little bit is that I guess I read the book RIP 9.0, but then there was a further study done at the University of Washington that looked at around the fault, that when there's an earthquake, there tends to be more landslides. And so it really, because my house is on the fault and it comes up right at Pine Lake, I would like to see this at least looked at for some assurance that, at least in a relatively minor earthquake like the Nisqually, that building is safe, or is that something that we need to address sooner rather than later?
And we have a 10-year capital facilities plan. It came out
Yes, I know.
about 2 years ago, and it identified all the things that needed to be done. And the one drawback that I have with the way Eastside Fire and Rescue is established is that the long-term capital planning on the facility side is weak.
Yes.
There isn't a really good mechanism to bring these kind of issues forward. And you can bring them forward, but it's harder. We don't have access to you like your staff has access to you to some of these facility issues, and tend to get lost in the shuffle when we do Eastside Fire and Rescue. And that's probably, like I said, that's one of my drawbacks, because that's what I spend most of my time doing is facilities. And I would like us to address the facilities in a much more forward-thinking way than we do right now. But it's always been hard because it's a 7-year agreement.
I agree, and I was hoping that we'd see some more of that in this contract, because looking at the facilities, or the capital fund for facilities, is really for improvements. It doesn't really deal with moving a building or completely remodeling a building. For example, we had Doug Eglinton here a little bit earlier from Lake Washington, where they actually go in and really renovate their buildings, move people out of the building, renovate it every 30 or 40 years so that it's updated and refreshed. And we aren't looking at that sort of substantive discussion in the agreement.
Well, one of the things that we've had discussion with as staff to staff is actually looking at the buildings that we do have currently, particularly Station 81, given the age of the building, and is it meeting our needs now? And again, what kind of shape is it in from a ongoing long-term basis? Also, the other thing that we have had discussions with also is as buildings need to be replaced, because they do reach a useful, end of useful life, is that building in the proper place? Because of, our roadway connections, et cetera. Where the buildings are placed currently may not be where we would want to if we were to rebuild it. So that's part of the issue that we want to look at.
City Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Wes, didn't we spend about $500 some odd thousand 8 years ago on this particular station?
I don't remember the amount, but yeah, and about 8 years
Significant
ago,
amount
it
of the
was
remodel cost.
it was remodeled, but that remodel was limited. It was limited into mainly the living area, so it didn't really address the bays or the
Structural.
like the kitchen area, the office area.
Okay.
So it still needs an upgrade. That was kind of the first step. But again, with what we're talking about now and looking at EFR as a whole and saying, where do the stations really belong? That'll be the first discussion I think we need to have is there a way to reallocate resources and actually have less stations and still cover the calls, or have the same amount of stations and reduce our response times? Those are some of the questions that we're going to be bringing forth to the board, and hopefully also get time in front of the councils to start talking about these issues. But these are high cost, long-term moves that everybody has to be ready to deal with that move for, the 30 to 40 year life of the building.
Right, yeah, the TAB discussed that over the last year about, particularly in an area as geographically challenged as ours, where do the buildings really belong and how do we service it, and how do we provide the level of service that we would like, which would be easy if this looked like Chicago where I grew up, which was on a grid system and cross streets.
If everything was flat and straight.
Exactly, that's why I said like Chicago, flat, straight, cross streets, it would work.
Okay.
Okay, on to another question. If an existing station needs to be expanded in terms of size to accommodate additional staffing over a 3-person crew model, who will pay for it? The benefiting member or the entire partnership?
Again, this is any kind of addition to a station that is outside of form, fit, and function is the responsibility of the partner who owns the station, or the party that owns the station. The facility maintenance fund that we have just covers what we call form, fit, and function, which is a form, is what the board called it. So if right now it has a 2-burner stove and the 2-burner stove goes out, we replace it with a 2-burner stove. So it's if we want to do a complete remodel or something, then that becomes something that the party has to fund. And so the entire partnership would not participate in that.
Even though it's, as you just finished saying, that EFR was going to be looking at the placement of buildings, and it's really going to be an EFR decision, and then are they going to come and tell North Bend or Sammamish or Issaquah that we need to move that building from here to here, and guess what, guys, you get to pay for it?
Well, that's the discussion that would have to happen, because what we would say is, here's a better way to respond, and then, everybody's going to have to get in the same room and go, okay, how are we going to pay for this? What kind of side agreements would we write so that, in case EFR's not still here, how do we continue to operate jointly out of that facility now that we've both paid for it? It's the same thing that North Bend and District 38 went through, and also Issaquah and District 10. District 10 gave Issaquah some money towards the construction of Station 72, and they got a joint operating agreement that's outside of EFR that says basically, if EFR goes away, here's how we'll continue to operate out of this station. District 10 and North Bend have the same kind of an arrangement. Because our agreement only lasts 7 years, if you're going to do it with facilities that last 30 to 50 years, you would have to have some kind of side agreement that said, here's how we're paying for it, here's how the use will look like, 40 years from now.
Okay, let's go on to the next question.
Okay, next question. How will the funding model accommodate different, either larger or smaller crew staffing, either on a 24/7 basis or on a differential shift basis, for example, days and nights?
And the current funding formula does not address this, and it would be one of those things that if somebody decided to add staffing to a station, then the funding formula, there's that opportunity to look at it every year, and it would have to be reevaluated. We've done it in the past, again, at Station 71, we used to have 2 crews there, and Issaquah in District 10 said, hey, we're paying for that at the time. That's how it worked that time. But we would have to, it'd be another agreement that would have to come forward.
Okay.
Okay, as existing equipment is rolled over and old vehicles are surplus, what happens to the receipts from the sale? Is it applied to the purchase of the replacement vehicle if titled to the member?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, does the sale revenue, does the sale revenue plus the accumulated depreciation funding for the item replaced from the equipment replacement fund fully cover the new piece titled to a member?
I guess I shouldn't just give it one more. I was just going to say hopefully. Most of the time it does. But there are times when, because the fund was not fully funded when it first started, and we brought equipment into the fund that didn't have any replacement value and we're replacing it, there's not enough money in the fund to cover all the vehicles. So a vehicle that was bought in 1990, and the fund didn't start till 2002, there's 12 years of replacement value that was never saved for that vehicle. So the fund is not a silo of members' money, and so the fund is a joint fund that we all are funding together, and we just make the purchases that we need to make purchases for. And so it's a joint fund, commingled dollars, I guess is one way to put it.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, that if there isn't enough money from the sale and there isn't enough in our equipment replacement portion, then you would go out and you would purchase the truck and you would use the fungible money, but it would still get titled to us?
Yes, still gets titled to you, it's still, that's why right now, if there was a big breakup, there would be some truing of the fund, because some people have new equipment that, they didn't save enough money for. And so they may have to take their equipment and give cash so that somebody else who hadn't bought a new piece of equipment lately would have more cash to be able to buy it. And that's just the way the fund was established. If we've been doing this since day one, it would be different, but.
No, I perfectly understand that, yeah, and I
Mr.
know
Mayor?
that we did not put that much money in at
Yes.
that time.
Point of order, I just want to understand, are we saving our questions, or are we going to be asking them point by point?
We were saving them.
Well, I think
Thank you.
you're saving them, and we'll stick to the questions
Okay.
on the screen.
Okay, thank you. And then Wes, what happens to any leftover funds?
I've never seen leftover funds.
Wrong country.
Use them at the party station.
Okay. Our members.
Doesn't mean we can't ask that question.
It's a very good question,
It is a
actually.
good question, but right now there really isn't any left. What we do is we put the fund out, I want to say 25 years. And,
Life of the equipment.
yeah, and so the fund, we make sure the fund is funded for the 25 years. And so what happened, I guess I really shouldn't have said I've never seen leftover, because 2 years ago, or maybe 3 years ago, we actually did a truing of the account and realized we'd been saving more money than we needed. And we gave back $200,000 or $300,000 back to the budget. And that was a one-time thing. I think that was in 2009. So every once in a while we true up the funds, because I'm projecting a rig may cost $660,000, and it only cost me $630,000. And so there's $30,000, and every once in a while you have to just true the fund up and go, hey, we have plenty of money. The fund is sufficiently funded, and like I said, I think it was 2009, we asked for less, basically. We didn't write a check, we just asked for less money than would have normally asked for.
So the better answer is that you do the adjustments and as budget process, in some years that if the funds is doing good, you would ask less contribution to your equipment replacement fund. And that's the answer to that question, actually.
Okay, let's continue.
Okay, next question is, are members who benefit more from others from the volunteer firefighter program being asked to assume anything more than a pro rata share of the expenses of the volunteers in the volunteer facility?
The volunteers are part of the overhead operating expense. So the whole volunteer program, which give or take about $300,000, probably a little less than that, is all just operational overhead. The actual facilities are covered by whoever has the volunteers. District 10 pays for all the volunteer stations, facility maintenance-wise. You have volunteers in all 3 of your stations, so you're sharing that facility maintenance with your other partners. So that's how that works.
So essentially, we get a benefit to Sammamish since we are one of the partners that utilizes volunteers to a large extent and is included as overhead. Okay, next question is, does the addition of a new member provide an opportunity to opt out of the agency? Would the adoption of a new organizational form such as a nonprofit corporation structure or not-for-profit?
And it's an interesting question in that it requires an ILA change to do either one of these things. So you have the ability to say, you may not be able to opt out of the agency, but you could stop the agency from bringing on a new member. You could stop the agency from becoming a nonprofit corporation. Now, whether or not the other partners would say, well, we do want to do that, and you could find a way to break up or whatever, have a amicable divorce or something. But right now, there's really not an ability to opt out. There's just ability to block it from happening.
Okay, question was, in the ILA, there was a clause that was eliminated, and it says, why was the $50,000 trigger on expenditures removed? I do not believe the remaining language is sufficiently tight. And I'll go ahead and answer that. That actually was a suggestion by the Sammamish City Attorney. If you look at the prior sentence where it requires 5 positive votes for any motion or resolution for passage, this was deemed redundant to that as well. So our city attorney actually feels that the language is tight enough for that. Okay, next question is, changes to the funding formula require a unanimous vote. Does this mean that a member seeking to address significant funding inequity can be blocked from addressing the situation by a single dissenting member?
And that would be correct.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Correct. That's a yes. It takes a unanimous decision by the board to change the funding formula. So any one voting member of the board can block it.
Okay. In section 5, page 4, there's language that talks about a benchmark to evaluate the cost effectiveness in establishing a budget for Eastside Fire and Rescue. What is this benchmark, and has it ever been used? Wes has the history behind that.
Yeah, this came out of the last interlocal agreement, so the 2008 agreement. And what we did right after that agreement came out is in the Finance and Operations Committee, we ran a number of different benchmarks, and so we did cost per firefighter. I don't know if I'll remember them all, but firefighters per capita, and we did a number of them. And what we found, which I think has been found and proven in most of the studies, is that we were always better than the benchmark we were using. One of the problems was the benchmark kept moving, and once we hit a benchmark and we were much better than that benchmark, the action would be, well, let's go to find a different benchmark. And so we did that for about a year and a half of chasing benchmarks. What we found is that, yes, we are 20% or so more efficient than all the other agencies that we compare against. And so what we use now for benchmarking is our statutory requirements on response times and reporting out to the community on our standard of cover.
And I'd also mention that one of the options that we would have would be to have the operating committee look at what benchmarks would be utilized, what would be most effective. You know, sometimes when the city benchmarks on something, we'll take a benchmark and we'll say, okay, we want to aim at 80% of that benchmark, for example. But that would be something we would work with our other partners to arrive at the appropriate benchmark. Let's see, next question is, will Sammamish retain full ownership and maintenance responsibility for our 3 fire stations, or will this be transferred to EF&R?
Maintenance is our responsibility. Ownership is City of Sammamish.
So we would retain full ownership, and we would also be responsible for any capital improvements to that fire station. Paragraph 16.3, relative to the return of the firefighting equipment and other assets, gives EF&R 1 year after notification of withdrawal for the return of the member property. This needs to be changed, and that, in fact, was voted on by the board. It has been wordsmithed by the various party attorneys, and will be part of the interlocal agreement as proposed. Okay. And I'd like to say right now we're halfway through the questions, so thank you all very much for your patience on this. Are we working okay for you all?
Just a little long.
So thank you for your patience. A lot of questions. Okay, next question is, discuss the options for providing service in the regional model versus the contract model.
So the regional model is, you have 9 career stations that move around. We talked about that. They back each other up. Gives you a lot of coverage, gives you a lot of resources to your calls. Your calls are covered. The contract model, you would tend to have fewer resources, and that would be, those resources would be, when they're tied up, you'd be looking at mutual aid to come in, if I'm understanding the question right. But the regional model, the drawback with the regional model is you don't have as much control on the gas, so to speak. You have to go to your partners and say, we would like to do something different, and everybody has to kind of agree to that doing something different. Because in a regional model, if you make a change over here, it's going to affect somebody else.
Okay, Station 81, given that it's on top of the Seattle Fault hazard or it can be retrofit, I think we already actually answered this question.
This assumes the fact that it is on top of the fault. Since I'm in a direct line east of there, I never thought there was that certainty.
Okay.
Is that correct?
If it's my understanding, go ahead.
I think Don Jaron's house is right on top of that one, so Councilmember Jaron's house.
Yeah, we have it retrofitted.
Since he's my immediate neighbor.
He has this big inflatable
if
donut.
That particular area is, if it's not on a fault, it's rather close.
But isn't the fault 7 miles down or something like that, as I understand it?
That's my understanding. It's rather deep. Okay. Let's see. Longer term, should Station 81 be relocated away from the fault? And again, we've talked about this, that is a good or potential long-term solution, and we could look at that. It'll be part of what we would anticipate being part of a longer-term capital improvement program. I'm sorry, Nancy, was that a question?
No.
Okay,
no,
sorry.
No, sorry, I'm just
Okay.
moving my fingers.
Okay. Okay, does how does EFNR plan to serve the southwest portion of our community when Snake Hill and other area streets are closed due to snow or fallen trees? And Station 81 is out of service due to move-up and brownouts.
So the one thing is that brownouts are a decision by the board. The board makes the decision on whether or not we're browning out stations or not, and that's a cost and control measure. Administration doesn't recommend it. We try to not have them, but the board sometimes authorizes them, and we do the board's will. But during times of inclement weather, we don't brown out. Even if we're in the financial issue, the board has given us the latitude to say, hey, if it's a high-risk day, don't brown out any stations or don't close any stations. And so we'll go ahead and hire the overtime. So we don't do it when there's inclement weather. So when there's snow or fallen trees, anytime there is inclement weather, we don't tend to do move-ups, a routine move-up, because everybody's going to be busy in their first due area. That doesn't mean that if there's a big structure fire someplace that some of the units aren't going to that structure fire. And so there could be a time when there's nobody at that station. And then, again, we use the CAD system we can shut down streets in CAD. We can say, hey, Snake Hill is blocked, and CAD can just block it, and then the computer goes around and recalculates and decides who's closest now that hill isn't, you're not able to make it up that hill.
CAT is a computer-aided design, right?
Computer-aided dispatch.
I was going to actually ask a little bit about this more, and so it's appropriate. When we talk about move-ups, we've been doing this is what I'm hearing, we've been doing this for as long as the ILA has been around, or as long as that station's been there. This has been typically a move-up, so the level of service really is not changing. It was really the funding model that brought up move-ups and brought it to our attention. I'm kind of getting that clarification here. But the other thing is, when you say a blackout or a brownout, the first thing is, ooh, that's not good. Our level of service has been, is going down. But what you just explained it, but could you reiterate that for me? If you decide to move something up, what is the plan then around that? How do we cover that area? And I think that's what this question is addressing, just for clarification.
Yeah, once that station moves up or is out of service for any reason, then other stations, there's a couple things that happen. One, CAD knows that the station's out of service, and it'll pick the next closest unit. And there's a lot of units that backfill that area that can get there fairly quickly.
Are they aware of it? I mean, is that the kind of thing that they know, okay, we need to be ready for this particular area? Is that what happens?
At times, during the day and when they're out, they know when everybody's out of service and when things are happening. They listen to the radio. The battalion chief knows what's going on, and he moves units around to backfill the areas that are weak, at any one time. So it's a constant move. One of my main jobs to do at night when I'm Battalion 74 is to do the move-ups. When there's a fire, I get in my rig and I start moving rigs around. And we move volunteer units, we try to get them to staff up, we move them into areas that are lacking staffing, and that's how we're always managing the system. And so what we try to do is make sure that there's a unit to be able to respond in each one of our areas. Sometimes we get down to where there's only a few units available. But then we have Bellevue, we have Redmond, we have other people that will come in and backfill also.
And has our level of service reflect the move-ups in any particular way?
It does, in that what we see that we're not penalizing anybody right now, and that station still has a very high availability rate, and it's still getting to its calls. So what you have to look at is if the station is not meeting its call volume and other stations are answering its calls too often, that's when we started talking about an availability problem. And so we're always looking at that, because once you start going into an availability problem, then you have to start thinking about more resources. And the closest station that we have right now to that is Station 71 in downtown Issaquah, but they're still 500 to 600 calls away from being at their capacity. And so and that's one reason why we moved a station in the May Valley, is because that station will take about 500 calls off of Station 71's response pattern. So we're always looking at those kind of things, so hopefully that answers the question.
Right, good, great question. Okay, another question. How does EFNR plan to serve the southwest portion of our community, the most difficult area to serve today when Snake Hill is closed for reconstruction?
Have we answered that?
Yeah.
I think we answered that, and I also verified with our Public Works Director that right now Snake Hill is not on our TIP due for reconstruction. The next thing we're going to do is to do some deep patching on Snake Hill, but not reconstruction.
Let's not go down to the fall.
The moving parts.
Okay. Will the Redmond Fire Department continue to provide auto aid to the northwest portion of our community?
And right now, we don't see any reason why that would change, but that is a decision for the Redmond City Council and the Redmond Fire Department, whether or not they stay in the mutual aid agreements and automatic aid response patterns that we currently have.
Next question is, I don't see any reference in the ILA to community disaster planning or training. Given the high probability of significant earthquake damage due to the location of the Seattle fault, how can we create a more robust disaster preparation and response plan? How do we step up the training of volunteers?
You had a good answer.
Well, okay. Essentially, we are working with Eastside Fire and Rescue on a regular basis as it relates to emergency preparedness. We also work with some not-for-profits related to the training of our citizens, et cetera, CERT being one, Sammamish Citizen Corps being another. We all work together. King County has a program whereby we all work together as well. This is one of those areas that we do want to improve our coordination, et cetera. One of the things that we do have in the event of a disaster, and we do open up the EOC, Emergency Operations Center here at the city, we in fact ask for a liaison from Eastside Fire and Rescue to be in our area so that we can coordinate with them. Also the radio folks, we have them here and we coordinate with Eastside Fire and Rescue as well. So we do have a plan. It is in effect. We do always can stand for improvement in that particular area. And it is something that is a big priority for us as we move forward. Okay. As Eastside Fire and Rescue is treated as a partnership, do they follow GAAP or tax accounting policies? And I could answer this, or you could. Okay, well, GAAP stands for...
Dangerous for former finance director to put the finance hat on.
Notice how I offer...
Wes, you want to take this one?
Pass that along.
Yeah, he might get into the matching principle or start to bore you with accounting terms.
Okay, essentially, GAAP is generally accepted accounting principles, and yes, Eastside Fire and Rescue does follow that. They also follow GASB, which is a Governmental Accounting Standards Board, their proclamations, et cetera. Given the fact that these are governmental partners, they in fact don't have to practice tax accounting. They're all tax. They're not subject to income tax. But the employees do pay income tax.
The only difference between GAAP and tax is that the cost basis is always related differently in the tax area.
Okay, great. Okay, then next question, do we have recent financial statement that summarizes our percentage of ownership in Eastside Fire and Rescue in total plus real property, equipment, and cash?
And I'm positive that your financial statements reflect that. We give that information to the partners every year, and it's reflected on our financial statements, except for the real property and equipment. That is, we don't reflect that on EFER's financial statements because that is, you guys own it, so it needs to be reflected on your financial statements. But the equity ownership in EFER is always on our financial statements, and I know for sure Sammamish puts it on their financial statements.
Okay, in the past 5 years, our costs have increased by 4.4%, 1.1, 0.076, 3.4, and 6.5%. Do we have projections regarding future increases? How does EF&R plan to moderate this past couple of year increases?
And the one caveat I'll have with this question is I could not find anything in our records showing a 6.5. The one that I show for that year would be a 3.18. So I don't know where the 6.5 number came from. The rest of them are all the same numbers we have, but 6.5, I didn't know where that came from. But besides that,
Show you later.
Okay. We do have projections, but what we have not done is put in the new funding formula into those projections. So you would tend to see a significant decrease in Sammamish's percentage increase. But traditionally, our budget goes up about 3% a year, covering just kind of labor, and 85% of our budget's labor, and the labor costs drive about a 3% increase. And so sometimes we're at 3.2, 3.4. And this year we would have been at about a 3.4, but we didn't use any reserves. So when you don't use reserves, you use them one year and you don't use them the next, it makes it look like you've really bumped your budget up. And it's just that you are not reflecting that deduction that you had the year before. So, and we do plan on moderating our costs, and we do that every year. One of our big things is that we are efficient, and we're always looking for efficiencies, and any efficiencies that we can find, we implement.
Yeah, one of the other things we had talked about previously is utilizing the operations committee to look at maybe some longer term projections and how do you mitigate certain positive years, et cetera. So it's something I think that operations committee should be tasked with looking at.
Councilmember Whitten?
In this regard, has any consideration been given to 12-hour shifts versus 24?
We've looked at different shifts, but not the 12-hour, I'll say not across the board. We looked at 12 hours for like a 8-car, an 8 unit for an additional unit.
Not for staff?
Well, it would be a staffed aid car that you could just do for 12 hours because our main call volume is between 11 and 11, kind of, 10 to 10.
That would have a dramatic impact on overtime, though, wouldn't it? And when people call in sick and things?
It would probably cause an increase in overtime, but the 12-hour shift is... it has its own set of problems. So 24-hour shift, for the most part, has been shown as the most efficient way to cover the 365, 7 days a week.
Thank you.
Okay, again, let's try to keep our extra questions till later, and we'll stick to these right now.
Okay, so let me ask a question since they've all jumped in on this one particular one.
Okay, very quickly.
Since everybody's asking. Just for you, Lyman, here, just out of curiosity, for the past 5 years, what has the city of Sammamish's percentage increase been for our costs? With the same grouping, would you know what that is, or average out to be?
Those were calculated based on our numbers, not...
Yeah. Oh, aren't these are the EFER numbers? I'm asking
Nope,
what Sammamish.
they're not EFER numbers.
No, those are your
They're our numbers.
Sammamish.
Okay.
These are Sammamish's numbers? No, but I'm asking the city of Sammamish's, though.
I don't have those numbers. If the council wants it, we'll bring it back.
Okay,
I don't have it top of my head, Romero.
Yeah,
I
and
used it based on their budget and their actual
I'm
costs.
asking our city.
Yeah, we'd be happy to get.
Expenses he's talking about.
We'd-
We'd-
We'd
okay.
be,
Got it.
we'd be very happy to get back to you on that. I will caveat that a lot of it depends on the work program that council sets. It's not constant from year to
Understand,
year.
understand,
so-
same as the board.
Well, fluctuations in the capitals, but we can get the personnel costs, that's easy, personnel costs, that about is 85% of the fire department, so we'll get you the personnel costs. That's probably what he's looking for.
Hey, Ben, just as a possible explanation here, if we're looking at the city of Sammamish only for these percentages here, which I gather is the case, the 6.5% increase being out of whack with everything else, did our AV recover faster than everybody else's?
Well,
As remember, we're AV based on this current formula.
yeah, we have been seeing increase in our assessed valuation.
That's what I wondered.
New construction is always separated from the tax bases, but in terms of the calculating the funding formula going forward, it's a good question, Tom. I need to take a look at that one.
I think that might be the answer to this
Right.
blip here.
I'll take a look at it.
All right, let's move on.
Thank you. Okay, when Kalahani annexes to a city, how will EF&R make up the loss of revenue?
And Eastside Fire and Rescue will not have a loss of revenue. Eastside Fire and Rescue receives revenue from the partners. So Fire District 10 will have a loss of revenue. What happens in an annexation is whatever city annexes Kalahani will pick up what District 10 was paying towards Eastside Fire and Rescue. And so they'll start paying that portion of the bill. And it's up to District 10 to figure out how they'll, if they have a loss of revenue, how they'll make up their loss of revenue.
But you may want to expand on how District 10 may lose money, because the District 10 charges so much, what is it, $10, $20, their rates?
It's really hard to put a rate to it since they have the benefit service charge, but
What do they generate
it's
from
about
the-
$1.60 something.
What do they generate from the Kalahani area, I guess?
Now this will go back a few years, they generate about, it was million two. Like I said, this goes back, and they were losing about $800,000 worth of expense. So they had about a $400,000 shortfall.
Delta. They were losing, what is their contribution to Eastside Fire Rescue for Kalahani area, District 10s?
Maybe we could hold our questions for later.
Well, I guess the point is
I'd
that-
have to look at that one up.
That answers the question. That's basically what answers the question.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilmember John.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, actually, the next two questions we've already answered. Let's see, and I believe we've answered this other
I
question.
think we've pretty much covered that.
Let's see, question was, why aren't schedules B and C in a database rather than an Excel spreadsheet? And I think it's primarily just for ease of use. That's the way it started out, and looking at a spreadsheet is relatively transparent to the partners as they go through and audit that. Next question is, I was pleased to see more accurate interest rate in the equipment fund, but that interest should be credited to the partners as earned based on the current ownership versus annually. Would you care to comment?
Yeah, I didn't see a question, but right now what we do with interest is it basically helps pay the sales tax. So I use interest to offset sales tax, and so it saves everybody from having to commit more funds to the equipment replacement fund.
Okay.
I believe that's the last of the questions that we received previously.
Okay, before we get to more questions, you're saying we need the executive session will take about 10 or 15 minutes?
Yes.
So why don't we go ahead and have a motion to approve extending the meeting until 11, and then we can, if we finish before then, well, that's a bonus. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
All in
Second.
favor? Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. All opposed? Well, we're good till 11, hopefully finish before then. So,
Okay.
You were going to open that up to additional questions?
Yep. Do we have other additional questions or comments, discussion?
Councilmember Odell?
Thank you. Earlier this evening, we received new copies of the ILA Exhibit A, B, C, et cetera. Are these different from what we've seen before in any way, shape, or form?
The only change is the 16.3 language in the interlocal agreement that you requested be changed from the last meeting.
And that's it?
That's
A and
that's
B,
it,
A, B,
except
C are the same?
Well, if you look at Exhibit A, we in the little pictures, the graphics, we went from member to partner.
Party.
Or party, I mean, I should say, back to the party station, party. So that is the only thing that changed. There may be some formatting or periods or commas, but nothing else changed.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? Councilmember Heck? Oh, no, I'm sorry. Councilmember Witten was first. Why don't you?
Thank you. I have 3 areas of concern. I told you I wasn't going to bring them up as questions because they're concerns, so they're statements. With the ILA. First one, well, 4, I guess, was level of service, but I think that will be covered in the operating committee, hopefully. So, so my areas of concern with the level, with the ILA and whether I personally feel like approving it or not, that's not black and white at all. There may be another way to handle them. For example, directing the ILA questions to, or concerns to go to the operating committee, I don't know. But there are 3 things, and I know they're city-driven, and as I mentioned before, I feel like in the past year I've been shut out of the process at this council level, not at EF&R, in terms of the comments on the ILA. Every time I've brought one up about the ILA, it's been shut down, saying it's too late. So I'm bringing them back again. I have concern about, and my concern is how the 3 coalesce. It's not individually, no one for me is a deal breaker. It's the combination of them which I feel can have some bad impacts to Sammamish. The first one is the control issue, reducing the voting on the budget from 71% down to 5 members. That were by itself might not be that significant, but it's in combination with the other 2 concerns that I have. The other one is the length of the agreement, which is the 7-year term. And the third one is the inability to terminate. We used to have an 18-month window. So what I am concerned about is how these work together. We could get stuck on a vote we didn't approve for capital costs, as I understand it, to approve something esoteric like a training center or a new station or something like that for EF&R as a regional organization that Sammamish did not approve. We couldn't, as I understand it, with a 55-man vote on the budget, if we objected to it, we're still stuck paying our share of it. And that includes capital costs, not just operating. Is that correct?
There's very limited capital costs that the board has any power over, so they're limited in what's in the unencumbered reserve funds, which is like $200,000 or $400,000 at times.
But if in the forthcoming year they wanted to build a training center that, let's just say it costs $5 million,
They don't have the ability to tax, to bond, unless everybody agrees to it in the interlocal agreement, and they don't have the cash to do it.
but what I mean is in the budget, they could budget for it, get the approval of 5 members for the next year, and have the cash come out as contributions from the partners, right? It'd be part of the budget.
I think what Wes was saying, for an expenditure of that size, it would have to be financed, and that would take a unanimous vote of the partners in order to finance it.
Well, what if it were 2 million? I mean, theoretically, though, we could be stuck on the line with this process without our consent, as I understand it.
I guess for non-financed items, that could be possible. But you're right, from a conceptual standpoint, that is correct. I think one of the things going forward that we have seen, however, is the willingness of the partners to work together. I think some of the members of the board have had essentially a different experience over the last year or so, particularly with some of the shifting of the board representatives from the other partners.
And from Sammamish also.
And from Sammamish,
I
potentially.
mean,
yeah.
there were conflicts between one of our representatives and some of the others, so. But I do see these three things together could put us theoretically in a pickle. I'm not saying how that we should handle it. I'm not saying we should say no to this ILA or even put it on hold. I mean, send out a notice and put it on hold and try and work it out. But I do see that these three are something that I just am very uncomfortable with.
Any other questions?
Yes. Since I
Deputy
couldn't
Mayor
comment,
Huckabee.
It would have been easier to go through it, but on page 11, there's a discussion around termination. And either the question was misunderstood, but I had talked about this with Mike Kenyon last week. Under the agreement, we can admit somebody else into the partnership, a party or member. I'm not getting my terms right. Wes, you said that whenever that occurred, the agreement essentially terminated because you had to rewrite a new agreement. Is
Yeah,
that
functionally, that's what'll have to happen, because all of the recitals, everything changes.
Yes.
So, the voting rights, everything in the interlocal agreement would change. So you basically have to rewrite the agreement at that time if you want to bring a new member on.
So basically, at that time, while I quite agree with Councilmember Witten, I would like to see an 18-month termination in the event that we do get caught in that situation where the budget is approved, and we are very challenged by that. But my understanding is because at that point in time, the agreement would terminate, it would be, everybody would have that ability to give notice at that time and leave. Is that correct or not correct?
In a case of a new partner?
Yes.
A party coming into the agreement? Correct. Everybody would have to vote in boards and councils in the affirmative for that to happen.
And I just wanted to, because I think there was, maybe it wasn't as clear, so I didn't hear it. It wasn't as clear as when Mike explained it to me. And actually, the change to the nonprofit.
Can I comment on that last point for just a second?
Yes.
Okay, they can't admit the new partner, but we don't necessarily get out of the agreement. They can't have the new partner come in, but we could still be stuck in the agreement just without the new partner.
But what I was saying is that if we approve the new partner, that agreement would terminate, and then we'd have to go to a new agreement. I wasn't discussing the approval because I know that we certainly have that ability to not do so. When I talked with Mike, the change to the nonprofit, because that's a specific, it's a specific duty that has to be achieved, the payroll. That's just simply being put into a new agency. There's no additional party coming into the partnership, so there is no termination there. The other thing I wanted to clarify is the real property, because that is still, the language is still a bit troubling to me. And Lyman, you said that the partner, that EF&R does all the maintenance and repair costs out of the replacement fund, and we pay for all capital costs. I'm looking at this agreement, and I've probably lost the pages now so you'll just have to wait a moment. Well, if I could have done it while we were working through it, I would have asked at that point in time.
Do you want to come back to it? Or?
No, I'll find it here. real property ownership, that's not where I wanted to go, so it's the next page, page 6, do you refer me?
12.4.
Get it all. I'm all so confused in here.
Page and
Oh,
5.
here it is. 12.5. Improvements to real property. The Board of Directors shall determine and carry out all improvements to real property. Upon the request by a party or parties, the board may carry out improvements to separate real property that are paid for entirely by a party or parties. That doesn't seem to reflect what you said, because the first sentence says that the board shall carry it out, determine and carry it out, but they have no power, but they don't have any money to do that. The second, it says they can approve that they determine the improvements, they will let us carry them out. Oh, no, they carry them out, but we can pay for it entirely, but we have to ask for permission to do that. The language here doesn't seem to reflect what you said, and I had brought that up before, that there wasn't the clarity in the language that I thought reflected what the understanding was. So tell me if I'm crazy or not.
Well, the language was written to say that, so if there's an improvement to be made to the property, that it's done by the board. In other words, you can't go in and say, we want to build a 5-story fire station, and we're going to put the firefighters on the top floor. So this is to say that, no, the board, the fire department controls how the building gets built. We don't determine, the fire department and the board doesn't determine if the building gets built, they determine how it gets built. In other words, so that it keeps up and it stays within our standards. Because the last thing we want to do is have a new station built that's not in our standards.
No, I understand that.
And so that's where that first sentence came in, and that's what it's addressing. And then the rest of it is about.
But if you determine and carry it out, so you determine that the doors at 83 need to be replaced earlier, okay? And you carry that out. You come to Lyman and you say, Lyman, I need this money, or to Joe and you say, I need this money to carry this out? Is that?
Yeah, what would happen, that's a different one. That's a
short.
maintenance issue, which what we do there is if it's over $10,000, we write a letter to Lyman and say, hey, we're going to fix this. It's over $10,000. You want to do it, or you want us to do it? If you want us to do it, we'll do it, and we pay it out of the facilities maintenance funds. If you guys want to do it, then you'll do it, and we'll pay it out of the facilities maintenance funds. So it's just who's managing the project.
This is talking about improvements,
Right.
not maintenance.
So a difference would be if at Station 83, we come to you and say, we really think because of ADA and privacy issues, we need to put in separated dorm rooms, which is a need at that station. That's one of the needs we have at that station. Someday it needs to be done. So we would come to you and say, we really think this needs to be done. And in particular, what would happen is, let's say that we're under a lawsuit because we don't have it done, and we're under some pressure to get it done. Then we would come to you and say, we got to do this because we're being forced to. And yes, you guys got to find the money to do it because it's an improvement and we can't do it out of the maintenance funds. We've also had cases where parties have come to us and said, we'd like to do this. And we say, okay, that's great, but it's not maintenance funds. You guys have to find the funds someplace else to do that project.
Okay. Again, there are buildings, and so there are different levels of doing improvements. So as I'd mentioned last week, we know we've had disagreements over the years about whether to repair a roof or replace a roof. I would have liked to have seen stronger language. This still doesn't entirely tell me how this is going to be done, because if you are under, like the ADA, if you were required to do that, can we say, no, I don't think so? And just,
Well, and
you
actually.
get sued?
Yeah, well, actually, you can, because they're your buildings, and there's really nothing we can do to them, because you own them. We could try to force it with this agreement, but, and a good example of this was the generators that were just put into the fire stations.
Okay.
We paid for a portion of that work, because we said the electrical work is outside of form, fit, and function, because you're putting generators in now that will power more of the building. So we'll pay for the generator, because we're saving money in the maintenance funds to replace the generator. So we'll buy the generators. City of Sammamish, if you want to do more electrical work, you need to pay for that out of your funds, because that's an improvement, which the city did. They set aside the funds and did the improvement side of that. We did the maintenance side of it. We bought the generators. So that's kind of how it works.
I wish the language reflected that, because I think that's a much more collaborative way of working. This doesn't imply that collaboration and agreement.
Perhaps, your point's well taken. Perhaps what we can do is, as part of kind of our administrative procedures and how this actually works, is go back and flesh that out a little bit better.
Thank you.
Would we consider that pretty much an administrative change if we can have it maybe come back to us?
I'm not an attorney, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
what.
I don't know
if
either.
it's a reflection of our.
We'll have that discussion with our city attorney.
Okay.
And see if that might fly.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. More questions?
Okay.
I think we've run out of questions.
All right, excellent.
So,
Thank you.
do you have a sum up, or are we, next steps?
I do.
Okay, very good.
This is my last page. Next steps. We're going to actually ask the council to consider the passage of the ILA next week on January 21st. Our recommendation essentially is to consider the approval of the ILA, subject to the approval by all the partners by the end of January. As you recall, the timeline as it sets is if we do not give notice and we do not have a new ILA, then we essentially are re-upping for another 7 years under the current interlocal agreement.
Yeah.
If all partners fail to approve the ILA, Sammamish then would give legal notice by the end of the month of its intent to withdraw, but also have the intent to reverse that notice upon approval by all partners in February. Again, I'll remind council, this, if in our ESET Fire and Rescue interlocal agreement is the city's single largest operating cost. And it's very important, and it would be a prudent business decision to keep that option open if, in fact, there's a remote chance of not having all partners approve the ILA. So that's
Will
our
the
recommendation.
resolution reflect that language?
If council so wishes it, definitely would do that.
Yes, we discussed that the other day, specifically after the board meeting where there was a discussion of whether the ILA language would be completed, whether the operations committee would be included, and in some cases that was going to go beyond the end of January. And as I recall in 2000, when we did the last agreement, there was just a pro forma notice of withdrawal issued so that there was time, so that we didn't automatically end up under the former agreement, so.
Okay.
I have a question to the city manager. Assuming that as expected, by Monday of next week, all the partners have approved the ILA recommendation, they've already approved the funding formula, that resolution dies, correct? And then we consider the ILA, but that resolution no longer is then on the table because all terms have been met, is according to legal and city.
Which, are you talking about the last year's resolution?
No, I'm
Or
talking about
the resolution?
the council resolution, that's correct, that says that the
Which one,
conditions-
Monroe?
Which one?
The one that we've been working on, that they approved the funding formula, the one that's being here, that says if they don't approve it by January 20, by the end of January, that we would give notice. So if as of Monday.
That's still in effect.
Yeah, I understand, but if the partners approve it on Monday as expected.
Not Monday.
I'm sorry.
Tuesday.
Do it Tuesday, is it? All right, if they pass it by
Be
Tuesday.
here on Monday, but you'll be by yourself.
Yeah. Assuming that they do that on Tuesday, then at that point, then that resolution, given that the attorney has said it has met the conditions, and then the cities, as I understand, that resolution disappears. And then whatever action we do then follows in the new.
But I'm trying to understand your definition of disappear. What do you mean by that definition?
Once
Do you
that all
mean
the
that
terms have been complied with.
Well, one of the terms of,
resolution doesn't disappear? Resolution
No.
still exists,
Yeah.
but the conditions of the resolution would be
Have been
met.
fulfilled.
One of the conditions of the resolution is that all, including Sammamish, must approve the ILA. So if we don't approve, we have to reapprove the ILA next week, or we send out the notice.
and we may not know by the end of the meeting on Tuesday if
The others.
all the partners have approved. So we have to have a contingency.
My recollection is that that resolution also called for a mandatory operating committee.
I couldn't hear you.
That the resolution also called for a mandatory operations committee.
It did.
It does, and the operations committee's already been created.
That it
Why is
was
that?
mandatory as part of the ILA.
That I did not see. I'll allow that to Don Jurin, and we have North Bend, who's already said it's been created.
Well, my reading of the resolution was, those were the items that we were taking to the ad hoc committee. And those things in the resolution, some of those were changed, including the voting number from 6 down to 5. That was part of the ad hoc committee negotiations, and those changed conditions were taken to the board of directors. The board approved the ad hoc committee's recommendations.
The EFR board.
The EFR board. And they then sent it back to all the partners for ratification. We had discussed the modified agreements as the ad hoc committee brought them back to us. And we instructed our, our members of the board to go back and vote approval of it. So the resolution terms are not exactly what we are discussing now. It's
I
the ad hoc
perfectly
committee's
understand that.
recommendations.
Councilmember Ramiro, or Valderrama, said that if the resolution was fully completed, which we know it's not going to because there have been subsequent decisions made.
I don't understand that, but let me interject one point. Our attorney last week said the operating committee, quote, has been satisfied. The requirements of the operating committee, quote, has been satisfied, unquote. That was his discussion until, I guess I'm confused as to what the issue is with the operating committee now.
I'm confused as to what the issue is with the resolution. The resolution is
Yes,
passé.
I don't see how it has anything to do with anything.
Yeah,
That's,
no, we're gone beyond the resolution. We had the recommendations of the ad hoc committee. We discussed those recommendations, instructed our members to go back to the board and vote in favor of approving the ad hoc committee's recommendations. And so we're under that now. And if everybody ratifies it by January 21st.
Thank you. That is my interpretation. That's not that the resolution has to be carried out because things have changed
Right.
subsequent to that resolution. Okay.
So if I could just add on to that.
Please.
So the resolution itself, the letter of it, we've already agreed to support the ILA if the legal and the adjustments that we've talked about have come through and everybody agrees to it. This resolution, because I agree with it, this resolution has already been, I don't know if we want to call it met, or, we've determined that we're accepting other agreements in lieu of the specific things written
Right.
in this resolution. We're saying this resolution is not effective at this point, is that?
Well, it's
Because-
effective, but, ultimately, the resolution is about agreeing to an ILA.
Right, there's only a couple
Once we
of-
do that, the resolution is moot anyway.
Right, there's only a couple of specific issues I think anybody could point to anyway, and frankly, the Operations Committee is covered in the LA generally, and it looks like the negotiations that have gone on have been favorable to this, so.
Okay, any other comments or questions? We'll have a resolution next week, and we'll take that up on the 21st. Next on our agenda, we have an additional executive session involving potential litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.110. We don't expect action afterwards, I believe.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
So we will come back and adjourn, but that's the last public.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Can I make a request? I'd like to ask that the council be provided with a hard copy of Lyman's summary here.
I don't need one.
The which now?
Lyman's presentation.
Oh.
Oh, the slides?
Yeah, we just email it tonight to the council.
Yeah, you can probably get a PDF for it. Would that be all right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Should we go to the executive session?
What's the expected duration?
Expected duration is 15 minutes, and there will be no action.
And the reason?
No action.
Reason, potential litigation.
Seeing who's in the audience, we can guess what it's about.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second, third, fourth.
All in favor?
Aye.
I think that's 100%.
By a vote of 6-0, it carries.
Joe, tomorrow. Joe Donasso? Yeah, that's Tom's computer.